Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all my brothers and sisters who are tuning into Project Barakah podcast. We have here our returning guest, Dr. Iman Saymeh. She is an educator and mental health professional, supports individuals, couples and families with compassionate and culturally informed care. I might add in that this juncture that I especially noticed and recognized this particular value during the COVID period when Ustada was, sharing lives and videos that was of great comfort to many people, including myself. Her career includes teaching in public and private schools, serving as a school principal in Orange County, California, and working as a resident counselor at Georgetown University and an adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Saymeh holds a dual master's degrees in instructional leadership in education and clinical social work, and a doctorate in higher education. Beyond her professional roles, she engaged in community and interfaith initiatives, serving on executive interfaith committees and providing first response mental health and support as a community spiritual chaplain. She also completed the IOK seminary program, earning a degree in Islamic studies. Her diverse background allows her to provide a thoughtful, well-informed and holistic guidance to her clients. Your doctorate, by the way, if I might ask first, what was your doctorate in, and what kind of specialization was that in specifically?
Beautiful. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Allahumma shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani liyafqahu qawli. I'm grateful to be back on this podcast. Looking forward to our discussion today, Mufti Mu'in. And Jazakumullah khair for you and the family at the Quran Institute for the beautiful programs that you produce and you make it possible for everybody to benefit from. My doctorate was focused on higher education. Precisely, I wrote about the effect of spiritual practices on the mental well-being of university students. And I wanted to see if the college students at that level, do they resort to spirituality when they are anxious or depressed or they go through any hardship? The spiritual practices is part of their self-care plan. And I had the pleasure to meet with different students, different levels, undergrad and graduate, and learned a lot from their background and from their experiences. And so that was my focus.
Alhamdulillah. I think that's actually quite pertinent to our conversation today, actually. I'll tell you why I think that's the case is because activism has always traditionally, especially within the West, but known within the Muslim world as well, as an endeavor for students, that the student generation are the ones who are the most, and I hope students don't take offense because I'm not trying to be Uncle Moinul here and have a go at you guys, but they tend to be the most at that period of time where they're growing, they don't necessarily know themselves very well, so things can resonate very easily with them, and that basically means that they can fall into the liberal left or the conservative right, or they can fall into certain hardline or extreme interpretations of Islam. They can fall into cults. They can fall into any kind of environment where they're especially more vulnerable, I would say, because they're engaging with the big bad world, the world as as we know it, in a way where far more freer than secondary or college life. University life is a lot more open and a lot more open with ideas. But with that level of openness, I find that there is a vulnerability that comes with the university generation, that they could very easily get swept off their feet with even speakers that are charismatic speakers, right? So in your experience, what have you found within your research in terms of potential vulnerabilities of university students to any kind of group sense of group identity. We know as human beings, we watch this even in wildlife, they tend to form packs because of safety in
True.
numbers, as the phrase goes. So how susceptible are university students to wanting to align themselves with an identity more for the sake of belonging than particularly, let's say, a well thought out ideas?
That's a beautiful question. It's very important for us to address. What are the things that we are facing, our youth is facing, in order for us to do better in our communities? And what you said can be true for any faith based community. It could be for Jewish or Christian or any other faith based communities that their youth come to campus and they face different vulnerabilities and they're faced with different difficulties. Does their spiritual practices that they've learned all their lives come true for them? For me, what I've seen, there's a difference between age groups. So if you work with the undergrad is different than masters and doctorate students. So the age group and maturity level plays a part in them assessing what they need and being able to advocate for themselves. Wanting to fit in with the wrong group of friends sometimes can be detrimental to their journey, and that can turn their journey into a different direction. And some of them, they're able to come back and make a U-turn due to the guidance that they will get or their teachings from their homes that they had. Some students are more vulnerable to these distractions given their backgrounds and the way that they grew up. It is very important for us to assess the environments that they came from for us to understand their experiences. And similar to what we've been talking about, if there is manipulations, there's control, there is lack of autonomy of the individuals at home, and that person wasn't seen, wasn't heard, wasn't given the opportunity to articulate their needs and wants, there is a bit of not knowing oneself. So when they go off to college, they try to be like everybody else rather than knowing what they want and they're okay
It's a
with
survival
who they are.
mechanism.
Oh yeah, they
So,
want to survive.
Ustada, this is interesting to me because I think whenever we talk about cults, cultishness, cult leaders, and the cult of the
Mhm.
individual, right? This word is thrown about by everyone. I mean, I don't know anyone who doesn't use this word to some degree. We have Islamophobes that describe the whole of Islam as a cult, and for numerous reasons that I believe, from a liberal perspective, are justified. They're not true, but they're justified according to that worldview. So, I mean, I could see everyone having to dress up in white robes and, and dispense with any of the apparels of the world, of their star class, their
Mm.
importance, but also their identity. A lot of time people dress in Hajj and Umrah. It's not necessarily what your class is, but it's also to do with your identity. But you have to strip aspects of your identity to be these people in unison, circumambulating around this black box, right? And and it's very regimented. There are certain, even the prayer, the salah, shoulder to shoulder, feet to feet, can sound quite militaristic and regimental. And so what that makes me think is that before we lean into into this idea that I'm into hip hop, I'm into, and I've seen this because I grew up, by the way, in a Somali community. So hopefully I'm a registered tribal member, right? So they will tell you, right? Or everyone who's watching Skawaran, right? The issue is that sometimes that because the identity that sometimes people have, like poor, Ethiopian, skinny, African, these kind of pejorative way of stereotyping, not realizing how beautiful that civilization is in terms of that continent, in terms of the scholarship from Timbuktu to further on to the infrastructure that exists. A lot of people, when they close their eyes, they imagine Africa. They're going to imagine like deserts and lions and the savannah or something, right? Or the Sahara, but they don't realize how sophisticated these lands are. So what happens is you go into university and you start leaning into an identity for survival, just so that you could be quickly interpreted.
Fit in.
So yeah, so you're going to start dressing like this or sounding like this or behaving in a certain way that's more African American, right? To give a category. Now that's not necessarily a problem because that is a culture, right? Like I've adopted some British culture in from dietary to the way I speak to the way I express myself that seems alien to where I come from in Bangladesh, where certain behaviors would look different. So I'm not saying that, oh, you've left your identity. I'm merely pointing out that we are highly adaptive people as human beings, and what we do is we try to fit in, not because necessarily we want to compromise our deen and our religion. For example, some people wear hijab, but they'll wear hijab with a blazer or something like this because they don't want to be like just black himar hijab going to work, because they don't want the dress code to be the primary conversation in the workplace with all these non-Muslims, for example. That's what sisters tell me anyway, right? They're not here to make a fashion statement. They just want to look professional. They want to do their hijab and jilbab, but they want to wear something that just makes it look like that, yeah, to blend in. I'm saying it, to blend in. But to blending doing tabarruj, to blending to do haram, to blend, no,
To
to
belong.
basic, yeah, just to get along so that I can be, the primary focus is my work, and it doesn't look like I'm trying to advertise Iran or something, right? I'm here just to come and do a job. So
Yeah.
we've found Muslims do this with our non-Muslim um, counterparts, non-Muslim counterparts. We tend to, and that creates other cultures like code switching, where you drop your consonants in certain vowels, and you speak in a more precise way when you're, because you don't want to seem like some back home, whatever, right? We all know have lived that life to some extent, right? And we have to survive, but all of that was to have husn al-dhan before I go into the point, which is, Ustada, I'll also say that the greatest cult that's going is the dominant culture in any society. Ibn Khaldun
True.
and others have discussed this. So it is no doubt that a Muslim man may feel less masculine unless he has a girlfriend, or unless he watches things and is aware of certain things that are, for us, vile, commodifying, spiritually damaging, of imagery of women. But he'll feel left out if all the boys and all the jocks, I think you guys call them the jocks or whatever, those types, right? That they're talking about all these things and I'm left out, right? I'm seen to be someone who, don't you like girls, right? So that pressure on a guy would naturally, that in itself can be considered a cult, because what you're doing is you're being slowly groomed within that community to, you're not okay,
Control.
you're strange, you're not you're not one of us. You have nothing in common because you observe all of these dietary and this relation to women. You're not, you're a bit more strict in terms of the way you behave around women and all these things. So I would say first and foremost to set the premise right, that I don't want to do this sort of Ashura, like I'm just going to hit ourselves for the next 2 hours. But before we do that, and I want everyone to know this, that when we criticize ourselves as Muslims, we do it because that is Islam, that we're willing to look in the mirror and criticize ourselves. Ustada, I know you're well aware that there are many ayat in the Quran where they didn't say the Prophet committed a sin. Hasha lillah, he didn't commit a sin. But he was told, why did you do this? You should have done something. Abasa wa tawalla is a good example, where
Yep.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will rebuke or account the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, khairul khalq, rahmatan lil alameen. He will tell him, why didn't you do that which was better? Why didn't you say inshallah? Why did you turn away from this person when you were talking to the nobility? So if imagine the Prophet having to recite those ayat in front of people who are trying to destroy him, the OG original Islamophobes. Imagine telling them, my Quran is telling me I could have done better. My Quran is condemning the Sahaba for why some of them left Salah, obviously while they were starving, for a caravan of goods. Yeah. So we shouldn't be afraid of introspection, but I would just wanted to premise the conversation that and ask you, how difficult is it for the student generation to hold on to their deen as Muslims, okay, who have commonality with non-Muslims, because we're both human beings, we're both bashar. وَلَقَدْ قَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, that Allah honored all human beings, all offspring of Adam alayhi salam. But how easy is it to resist and not fall into for example, There's one which is just socially in terms of men and women. That's one I'd like you to comment on. And second, which is to do with values. So, for example, how do I go home not thinking my father is a patriarch if I'm a Muslim woman? How do I go home uh, seeing that there is some, not complete, but some distinction between the way the sons and the boys are being raised and treated, right? How do I reconcile the fact that when I see, a certain problem, that I'm not now going to use the lens that was given to me in a vacuum of no other way of life, no other deen is in my mind. So when I go to university, I don't just learn how to pass my BA honors degree, my master's, my magister. What I'm learning is actually the deen that built the philosophy, that built the civilization I'm currently living in and breathing in every moment of my life. How does that cult of society, where there's dominant ideas, dominant views, often in contradistinction to our own, how do we coexist, and how do we and what to what level do you think that cultishness exists, or that pressure exists within university life?
Beautiful. To go back to the example that you gave in Surah Abasa in the Quran, we need to distinguish how much the Prophet ﷺ had boundaries with who he was, meaning his job. He's a prophet to deliver Allah's message, and who he is as an individual, meaning how long and how much he took to cultivate that heart to have reliance. So when constructive criticism came in, he didn't crumble. He took it fully, he owned it, he shifted things, he was able to take it with grace. He wasn't defensive, he wasn't opposing of it, he wasn't pushing it away. Similar to nowadays Muslims' identity. If the Muslim identity is not intact, it's not done with grace, if it's not cultivated with mercy and compassion, it was imposed upon, it was shoved down someone's throat, it was, out of being controlled, or you have to, or what do you think people are going to say about us, or anything like that. So that heart hasn't cultivated spirituality. So when that heart is off to campus, to a college campus, that heart is a little bit lost. There's no GPS. There's no compass inside. So there are many things that heart is open to. There is party life. There is spirituality if they have a chaplain or any kind of spirituality center on campus. There is the MSA, the Muslim student groups. If they gravitate towards that, they will go there. But that heart, however you end up going on campus, that will tell you where your heart is at. And sometimes if there is no guidance on campus, and there is no good companionship, and no parents that will keep up with what's happening on campus, how was your day, that person can go astray a little bit. So it goes back to the nuclear family that child came from, that student came from, and the opportunities they have on that campus. I often, when I used to meet with parents from different walks of life, I always tell them, choose a college campus that will make your son or daughter stronger in whatever path that they're on, spiritual path, academic path, social path, as far as being closer to home. Like, really ask yourself, what is the most important thing for me? Muslim students' parents would come and say, I want them to be stronger in Islam. It's not something that we did at home, we feel guilty about, or it's the center part of our upbringing for our child. It's very important for us. So it's really whatever that heart is important to, that heart will end up being the results until that person want to do something different. And the hardest part is to see people going astray, but that's also part of their spiritual, inshallah, their spiritual turnaround, their spiritual, U-turn that they will do, that they have to venture into something on their own to taste what it means to be away from faith. And then sometimes they make a U-turn and sometimes they don't. But it's not something that can be imposed or controlled or pushed upon. It has to be chosen and accepted for it to make a difference. What do you think of that?
I mean, so
It's
I
hard
think
to say. It's
I
hard
think
to
because
hear.
you have sons, mashallah, who are, you know, grown adults, mashallah,
Yes,
right? Very,
yes.
I would say, established kind of people, and so a lot of the time when we want to tell people, look, people need to be able to choose and to think for themselves. It's easy to say when it's our own kids because we want to tie them up and lock them up for some of the dangers when they're
Because
young
we will
and they're
know what's
vulnerable.
best for them.
We know what's best. But ultimately, this is a good premise of, because we're talking about human beings, right? Before
Yeah.
we even get to Muslim, I think one thing we have to appreciate is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most powerful, the most mighty, the most wise, the most knowledgeable, in his wisdom has determined that he wants to create human beings to choose.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's already a shocking thing. Yeah. That people are created to be able to choose. So there is in Islam a strong desire to want to influence people to choose to do the right thing. Number one. But there is another, which is to forbid the munkar, which is to create the boundaries so that you incentivize people within a family structure, within a community, and within a nation to incentivize people to do good and to disincentivize people to do bad. That is something that Islam gives us. A very common discussion and a good example. I think it was Sheikh Hamza Yusuf who said, I think it was him that mentioned how if you run the highway and the roads and everything on just pure taqwa, right? The truth is most people, even if they had good intentions, the chances are they would speed when they feel it's necessary and so on. So you need traffic laws, you need traffic lights, you need speed limits, you need all of these things. You need limitations because if we allowed the road to purely function on ikhlas, there'd be mayhem on the road. Do you see? But the idea is that when you're stopping at a red light at 2 in the morning, when nobody is there and there are no cameras, this is where you want to be, right? That's what we want to achieve. But
Well, you still
sometimes
do the right thing.
you want to do the right thing. But the issue is and I have a sentence that I've been teaching for years in the madrasa, which is Islam does not rely on the safeguarding of the majority on the piety of any individual. I'm sorry. That's not the Islam does not operate on that. The Islam will not say that we just hope we really have a good imam. We hope we have a good leader, or we hope we have a good. It doesn't. Even a family, a father or a mother, Islam does not rely on the safeguarding of the entire structure on the piety of an individual. Do you see? You know this idea where you get the guy in the stock market where he's selling off shares, that means that people in that company will not get their pensions or whatever, right? Some example like this. We cannot rely on him to have what we know as a halo moment while he's in the stock market, right? All that greed and all of that, ruthless culture we've obviously seen in different films and behaviors we've seen on what they're like, these stockbrokers, right? We cannot rely on him to go, you know what is if Allah's watching, or have some sort of halo spiritual experience. With respect, Islam does not rely on the individual piety for the safeguarding of the collective. However, that means that individuals can mostly make mistakes as long as it only harms them. Islam steps in because it's not right that if you misunderstand Islam, that you can go on TikTok now and tell everyone you don't trust any hadith because
Yeah.
it's all based on. No, I'm sorry. Then you were going to have this thing called the Dawah Bros who are going to come up and they are not going to do it, maybe, in my opinion, suboptimally. Okay? Suboptimally. But they are going to then pull that person up and you're going to say, oh, but this is a very vulnerable sister, this is a vulnerable person. You need to be vulnerable in your own time.
Chaos.
Yeah. If you're going to be vulnerable and mess up 500 other sisters who look up
Yeah.
to you, then someone is going to, Islam doesn't allow, this idea that I mean, you have this in the West, it's called the public good. There's a certain dress code you have in the public, even in America, where it's called some like Public Decency Act. There's certain behaviors, I don't want to go into it, but there's certain things that you cannot do, certain explicit things you cannot do on the sidewalk or on the street. You will be arrested because certain things to a different degree than ours, but they have that line that in the private space that you do in your own home, you can't do on the pavement in the street. And if you do, you'll get arrested. So the question isn't whether the distinction is made between the public good and the private individual freedom. The question is where you draw that line, because
Yeah.
nobody is saying you can just be free, and there's no civilization or society. In this, there's a famous saying by I think this economist that in America, if you don't pay a certain bill, you will have interest added to that bill on something small like a on a
Yeah.
license, some furniture you didn't pay for, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't pay that bill, you'll have a interest, and then that interest will create a fine. Then you'll get a legal thing, and then you'll have bailiffs, and then when the bailiff comes to collect the money or collect some of your assets, if you get in the way of that bailiff, they will call the police or pin you down themselves. Yeah, one of the programs I used to watch as a child across the ocean was Dog the Bounty Hunter. So I have this thing of where in America you got these guys who look like bikers, and they go around taking people's TVs and furniture. But the point is you have the Dog the Bounty Hunter or whoever come round, and if you obstruct them, they can call the police, and law enforcement will take theirs. Now, ultimately, this was just for a sofa. This was just for a widescreen TV you didn't pay for. But eventually, if the bill goes up and you refuse to pay
You'll your
your
house.
for your house or your car, they will repossess the house, they will
Yeah.
repossess your car, and if you get in the way, you will be, and if you then resist arrest, you will be in prison. So you'll be in prison for not paying for a sofa. Right? I don't know why sofas are on my mind. Maybe because of the
We
plethora of
have a lot of
sofas
sofas
behind you,
behind me.
right? But the point the point is that is a truism about Western life, that people think that you're not completely free. You're free. So I personally believe, as Muslims, we believe that you're actually free within a very small slither of human experience of what really means to be a human being. Connecting with your God is like 95% of that pie. So within 5% of that, what we call the human experience, within about 3% of that, like 3% of that pie is sensorial pleasure, watching as many things you like on screens,
Yeah.
messing around with whichever opposite, whatever, as much as you like. With respect, just living for the tongue, living for the eyes and the loins is not a heightened experience of freedom for us as Muslims, because we watch Bahimiyya, we watch
Yep.
the animals, and we know
Holistic kind
that
of
if
lifestyle.
Sheikh Waliullah ad-Dahlawi, famous sheikh that is the founder of really so much of Islam for us South Asians, right? He says that if you were to look at what you define as human felicity and freedom, ultimately freedom and human felicity, he'd say most of these things, if you say we derive our freedom from happiness, from beauty, he says the peacock ahakku minki. Yeah, the peacock has more right than you to beauty. If he says it's to do with strength, oh, I'm such a strong, the wild bear with one swipe of its hand can rip any MMA fighter into two pieces, right? So it is more right to be a better human being than you because it's stronger than you. If you value your freedom and your felicity based on that, for how many children you have, then he says there are many animals that are well endowed and have many offspring. They have like 30 offspring and puppies, and there are many animals who are more fertile and more, all of that stuff, right? So the donkey has more right than you. If you value your happiness based on how much you can accrue, then he said there are birds who can gather and they make nests and they gather things, and there are many animals that constantly collect things, right, and pile them up and stockpile them beyond even their own need. They do this. So he says if you seek happiness through any of these, basic animalistic existence of just the desires and the instincts, he says the animals have more right to be human than you do, which is a very interesting way to look at freedom. He says true freedom is to harness all of those animalistic desires, those psychologies, the instincts we have, harness them to connect to the creator of the universe, the creator of all the planets, the creator of the cosmos, the creator of all plants, animals, flora, fauna, all these entire, all of the beauty that you see, the surah, the suwar, it makes you connect to the musawwir. So, it's a really nice way to look at what true freedom is. But I think how you define what freedom is
Yeah,
will determine,
that's what it
the
refers.
famous statement of the Sahaba where, Muhammad came to free us from the worship of the creation to worship
Mm,
of the creator, right?
mhm,
I
mhm.
think this was, I can't remember which of the Sahaba it was that visited Najash. I think he said this. But I think that university students, before we go to the intra-Muslim kind of discourse, I
Mhm.
think Muslims have a hard time growing up in a society where they're expected to be. And I'm going to be honest. I'm going to now cuss your side of the ocean a little bit on one something.
Okay.
Us British Muslims, right? We find certain levels of patriotism just ick. Like it gives us the ick. Patriotism, like, I love America, the flag and my fellow American. When we see Muslims do that, we just feel a certain level of, you are in a cult, right? That you see, there's nothing wrong with loving your people.
Why do you go there? Can you just explain it for the viewers? I mean, for
For the
whoever is
viewers,
listening.
because we're discussing the fact that there's a wider cult, yeah,
Okay.
of the fact that the need, the pressure to fit into the wider narrative, irrespective of truth, irrespective of justice,
I see.
irrespective of history, may I add, history of the countries that we both are living in, and right, that there's one thing which is, I love my neighbors, and they're all non-Muslims, majority are non-Muslim. I love my neighbors. I tell them I love them, actually, yeah, and I get along with them, and all the rest of it, and my
Good.
father taught me to do that. But the issue is, and we have an affinity to them, because even in the ayah, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ يَا قَوْمِ, Sheikh Tantawi says, why is qawm mentioned twice? Because of the affinity, the closeness with the people you grew up with. وَمَا صَاحِبُكُمْ بِمَجْنُونَ, yeah, your companion, meaning, oh mushriks, your companion Muhammad, he's not mad.
Mhm.
You've known him all your life. He's shown no signs of psychological disturbance, or a major signs of any. He hasn't shown these signs. Why would Allah call him sahib to mushriks? So let me caveat that point, and Jazakallah for making me do that. But the point is we feel part of a society. We love our neighbors, but there is a level of, like, really, really loving the Democrat Party, or really loving a party.
Mhm.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
but what their values are and what their beliefs are is, you can be, that is also a part. You see, we only mentioned the micro cult. The
Mhm.
macro cult is the wider society. Tabbat yada
So what is
Abi
your
Lahab.
idea of belonging in a society and
Mm,
being a positive and giving and beneficial citizen
mm.
if it
Without being
doesn't
part of a
have
cult.
our values?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that that's the fact that you're a person who contributes to that society.
Yeah.
We just recently started the Tazkiyah initiative at the Quran Institute, right? What is that? It's ironic because we're cleaning streets that are, not majority non-Muslim land. We're cleaning the streets, but we didn't call it tahur or tasfiyah or something. We call it tazkiyah because we said this is purifying our hearts to clean up the streets. We're picking up litter and all of these things. We didn't say, like a good citizen, well, I'm a taxpayer, I pay taxes, don't I? No, civic duty, the sense that it's part of Iman. The Prophet ﷺ said in a sound hadith, I saw the best of the people and the worst of the people. He was made to see, like kind of like a revelation. The Prophet was made to see that, he said, and the best of the people were picking up harmful objects from the floor in the pathway of the streets, right? So inshallah, may Allah make us those that the Prophet ﷺ saw in the
And
future. But
and
that's what we
so
should do.
do you think the concept of belonging,
Mm.
it doesn't have to be belonging externally, but making sure that you belong to yourself internally and having your own map within you? Because it seems like you're saying a person needs to belong, but not according to the outside terms or laws or regulations or however that person needs to confine to that group or society, but to make sure that they belong, like they have that sense of certainty and security within themselves so they can give and be
Yeah.
beneficial.
So, like, the primary lens where you draw your boundaries. Remember, anytime someone crosses a boundary, to the extreme. I mean, someone can just be harsh or sound off, but if
Mm-hmm.
someone is crossing that boundary to the extreme, that is considered cultish behavior. That is what we call pervasive, abusive, manipulative behavior. So if we're going to say that, we have to determine from where do you construct this external boundary? It's from what your
Yeah.
state of your heart, and your heart has to be, as far as to my understanding, conditioned uh, based on the framework that Islam gives us. So again, that's easy to say, based on the framework that Islam gives us, like it's as clear as to everybody. What that basically means is that if someone who is a non-Muslim, I'm going to make some controversial points, but I don't mind. If someone was a Muslim attacking my non-Muslim neighbors, I would take the side of my neighbors. Do you see? I would take the side of my neighbors, my non-Muslim neighbors, over some guy shouting takbir, I would take the side of defending my non-Muslim neighbors. That's my loyalty. But that loyalty doesn't come because of the same reasons as the neighbor has some loyalty towards me, because I imagine my non-Muslim neighbors would stick up for me as well in many, and they have, you know. But the difference is that I am allowed to have different reasons in my qalb, in my heart, for why I have solidarity. Two people, ta'awanu ala al-birri wa taqwa, means that we can intersect, but for different reasons. So I can get along with my non-Muslim neighbor and defend them for different creedal perspectives. By the way, that's not unique to Muslims. I don't know why us Muslims are our loyalty is ever questioned, because in the US, last time I checked, you have socialists, you have socialist Democrats, you have capitalist Democrats, you have anarchists, you have hardcore communists, you have everything. Yeah, you got the whole shebang, right? You got the whole lot, and nobody's questioning. Unless there's some sort of McCarthyite sort of resurgence. Generally speaking, most non-Muslims amongst within themselves know that love your fellow man can be built on a different premise. So Islam tells us contribute to society, never endanger your neighbors. You can't declare war, for example, on your neighbors. This is stupid. If you ever did, you'd have to de-citizen yourself as a Muslim. If we're going to go, remember, I'm not recommending anything. I'm talking about hardcore dispassionate fiqh. If we're going to talk about dispassionate fiqh, then you need to uncitizen yourself and be part of something separate. If you had a problem with a nation, you can't live and eat with them and share and break bread with them, and then all of a sudden, that's not what I mean. Hopefully that caveat helped. But what I mean is that for us as Muslims, and I want to kind of draw on your Arabic, the fact that you're an Arab, which is, we know what ta'assub is. Ta'assub is when the asab, the vein, it comes from the root word, when the vein pops, right? When it inflames, your blood gets hot for something. Your blood get hot for your nation. Your blood get hot for your people, and so on.
Something within you got triggered.
Yeah, and we know this is something that is actually satanic, because original muta'assib is shaitan. Ana khayrun minh.
Are we talking about narcissism? Are we talking about defensiveness? Are we talking about stubbornness? How would you categorize that?
I think the arrogance, the kibir, first and foremost, is the spiritual problem, but the manifestation is ta'assub. See, when you say, like any group, and like I said, we will get to groups, but when we do the entire thing of a cult or a group, that cult could be a nationalistic group. The fact that they can't see Muslim citizens in America and think, do you know what? She doesn't dress like me, but she's a human being. She's a citizen. She pays her dues and she lives her life. Now, if another person can have pink hair and join a rock band and go crazy, and drink and take drugs, why can't someone equally earn a living, pay their taxes, and live a very different life? A very communal, family-based, life where they are very overtly Islamically looking, for example, right? So asabiya is the core. That's the hal. That's the spiritual disease. But when that spiritual disease manifests, asabiya. So this is actually a very interesting concept, that a lot of people who prioritize the individual, they see any form of collective, even the policeman, where all the police are corrupt. Obviously, I do believe that there is some level of institutional racism, for example, in the UK at the very least. I don't know as much as in the America,
Yeah.
but
I think
the idea.
racism exists everywhere.
But the idea that you're going to poke a policeman, push him, not follow certain things, and then when he asks you to comply, you don't comply, and then he's wrestling you to the ground, and you're just having this fit. And I've seen this a lot. Maybe I watched too many arrest videos of American citizens, but a lot of the time I just think, what are you doing, right? I've seen other Muslims, African American Muslims, just listen to the same instructions, say, sir, this is what you want done, no problem, here's the paperwork, this, that, and the other, and they let them go. When there's malpractice, that's wrong. But the issue is that I get this sense that that person, and sometimes it's part of the alphabet group as well, they're literally screaming in the face of a policeman, right? That policeman still is a human being. He has a family, he has children. When you're acting in that way, usually someone could be pulling a weapon, they could be, he's trained to deal with dangerous circumstances and what are the precursors to dangerous behavior. So what I've found is when you are in a hyper individualized worldview, right, you tend to think any collective whatsoever, a jama'ah, a society, anything is basically a cult, right? And when you basically fall into this problem, what I call collectivism, hyper collectivism, or it creates this other thing called de-individuation, the loss of sense of self, that I'm no longer an individual. And I believe that the best balance between collectivism and individualism, Islam supports a level of individualism. For example, when I pray behind an imam, I pray for me. Right? The imam, let's say he's thinking about the World Cup. Okay, he's thinking about the World Cup. Whether he's thinking about the World Cup or not, my khushu' is individualistic. My khushu' is with Allah. My khushu' it doesn't matter. I can't say to myself, the imam, he must be so pious, mashallah. He's thinking about God and the book and the this and the angels, so my piety is on his behalf. No, I pray for me. You see? And similarly, although the imam leads everyone, we are not allowed to go ahead of him in la tusawi. Yeah, you're not allowed to go ahead of him in ruku' or in sajda.
Not equal to each other.
Not equal even. Now that's hierarchy. That's hierarchy. That's iniquity. That's inequality. That's superiority.
So how do we justify that?
We justify it for the fact that it is inherently human to have hierarchy. The question is, who decides that hierarchy? Is it man, who can have views towards women because of his experience around males? Is it woman, who spends time around listening to every female and having views about men and having a genderized worldview? Is it the poor, who think all the rich are undeserving? Is it the rich, who think all poor people are lazy? Is it the educated, who think the laity are too stupid to be asked? Is it the people who are low education, who think that these people don't, the culture of Trump culture of don't listen to experts, right? So we have all those extremes. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ustada, can't be lobbied. You can't vote him out. You can't bribe him. You can't threaten him. You can't cancel him. And he, when we say he out of respect, but we know he's not a gender either.
Yeah.
So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unlike all these other people who are prone to using their life, Karl Marx. Karl Marx watched his mother and father work in factories and be mistreated and, treated quite awfully, as a node in a network, as a cog in a wheel, and they were mistreated because of the owner of the company or the owner of the factory in the the Industrial Revolution. So what happened is no doubt that in his childhood he thought, when he grew up, he thought, do you know what, the means of production, the workers own the means of production, so they should have the share of what they produce. You get it? So it's his childhood that's fed into his worldview. And now, if you look at to anybody, I was aware of the works of Germaine Greer, famous feminist. I think she'd be considered second wave feminist now compared to today, right? Famous feminist. We came across her because of English literature we were studying at school and stuff. But if I'm not, she's an Australian feminist writer. But if I recall, her earliest childhood memory was to be blunt trauma to her head by a male figure in her family. She was in, she could have died basically because of the way a male in her family treated her. Does that somewhat inform her views about rights of men and women? Probably, right? So the issue
Does that
is
damage and cause trauma and cause
exactly,
friction and
exactly.
separation?
Which,
Absolutely.
by the way, can cause great benefit in how you deal with problems. The Prophet was an orphan, and that greatly benefited his view of looking out for orphans and looking
Very
out for the
true.
poor. But it can also make you oversteer as well. Your experience can make you hate all women. Your experience can make you hate men. Your experience can make you hate all imams and hate any form of authority. So what I found is that the one who can strike the perfect balance between the individual and the collective is Allah. And so, before we go into the group issue now, I wanted to mention that in Islam there is a qaida fiqhiyya that all ulama know. I think all ulama know, all madahib follow this. They say, النفع المتعدي أفضل من نفع القاصر. Beautiful, Jamil. The benefit, the collective good. نفع المتعدي, the نفع, the benefit متعدي that encapsulates everybody, yeah, أفضل من نفع القاصر. It is superior to the individual benefit. Almost in every situation in Islam, the collective good is more important than the individual, unless the collective abuses the individual because it goes against the right of Allah, which is a greater right than the right of than whatever authority you have in any form. That's because Allah says this in the Quran. If anyone's wondering if there's dalil, ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasul wa ulil amri minkum. Every scholar will tell you that this wow says that ultimate and absolute obedience and compliance, if a better word, maybe people won't understand just obedience, but compliance and obedience is to Allah and His Messenger and those in authority amongst you. But the separation here is that they are fallible and can be accounted and will make mistakes and must be accounted. And إذا تنازعتم في الشيء, if you differ on a thing, you have to go back to the absolute source of a pure exemplification of leadership and collectivization, which is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He exemplifies collectivism and individualism par excellence, like the best version of both, right?
But imagine, Ya Mufti, Mufti Ma'in, when you are describing this beautiful circle of going back to your leader and the respect of authority and having a good dhann of Allah. Imagine if that person comes from a nuclear family that abused them, or a community or a cult, the journey that they're going to be on, the pain that they'll be facing until they turn themselves around, or they encounter somebody who is gentle and compassionate and would support them. And I know we talked about, there was another episode where we're going to talk about how do people leave these kind of communities and how do people heal from that. But until they get there, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of stuckness, and there's a lot of, even though perhaps things within them are shifting, like they're becoming more positive, more religious, more spiritual, more healthy, they're still stuck in that toxic environment. What is your experience with that?
I definitely think, which is one of the reasons why I gave so much importance to family program. My background, we've spoken. Yeah. Why on earth?
Please give your background again for those who don't know you and they might be listening to us.
I mean, it's boring background,
but just a little bit.
I've been in a kind of like Islamic political activist for 20 years. I've demonstrated outside enough American embassies and this embassy and that embassy, as many people have. Alhamdulillah, I was very active from a very young age, from about 8 years old all the way to 44.
Let me ask you, how did you put yourself on that path? Is it parents? Is it
the
community?
My oldest brother. It was Islamic groups, an Islamic group in particular, and it was the environment. And because we're very similar age, so we remember that there was only 3 groups you could join, or 4 groups. Remember those days? 5 or 6 channels and 4 groups. Now there's 1,000 channels and 1 million groups. So what happened is,
although some of these groups, yeah, Mufti, you would agree that they were created on righteousness and goodness.
Absolutely.
And it just kind of deviated into something different. Would you say that?
Definitely, in many places it deviated. And I think there's a lot to actually unpack on that thing. But like what I found is when we're talking about the cults and the cultish leaders, and we're going to now start unpacking that. But one thing we have to admit is you should not start with the premise. This is the statement, and I want to see what you think because I'm going to make it just an airtight statement. It is
Sure.
incorrect to start with the premise of looking at Muslim leaders and groups and organizations and Sufi orders or whatever as cults before you accept the wider dominant cult potentially that you could be living in. It's unfair to look at the microcosm of what Muslims are doing to survive in a society that's quite frankly taking away our children. Ask any parent, you're my age. We are so fearful for our children, are we not?
Yep.
Yeah? You know, we
Even
are.
Sayyidina Nuh, and he's a prophet, and he, mashallah, lived many years to call people to Allah. He was still worried about his son drowning.
Absolutely. And
Right?
yet we're still worried that our children would want to die on their hill. You know,
So,
the whole point of Nuh alayhi salam's son was he felt that rainfall creating floods, how high could it be? So I go to the highest mountain, I sat there. Why do I need to be part of your ark and your boat? And people are laughing at you. Society look at you as an outsider. Society look at you as backwards. Society look at you, they mock you. Dad, I don't want to be part of that life. I've got my own ideas, you know. I'm an empiricist, maybe. You know, I know how much rainfall can exist. I see the highest mountain. And as the English phrase came to be, the idiom of um, dying on your hill, that's where it came from. This Nuh idea of Nuh alayhi salam, that because his son died on his hill, he went to the highest hill and he still drowned. Yeah, min maghruqin. So what happens is we also don't want our children to think wrongly. Obviously, if we're wrong, then our children can tell us something we've not understood. But ultimately, the our children sometimes will think we know best because we went to university and you don't know. I've studied intersectionality and now I realize that my mom is a narcissistic Ustada Saymeh
all the
you know,
labels and all
has
the diagnoses.
internalized misogyny because she thinks men have some rights, and you know that's what happened. You can't even say, I think yeah, men have some rights, some distinctions, bima faddala Allah, you know, just some in some
That is
slither
true.
of a
Nowadays, everything is a click. Everything is a triggering word.
exactly.
Everything.
Everyone's part of a group.
Yeah.
You are now internalizing misogyny. Like if I say that some people are so against any form of collectivism and they view them as cults that they fight policemen over nothing, right? Right? That I'm now internalizing racism. Do you see? Despite me saying that there is systemic racism. But the point I want to make is that when it comes to a person who approaches a group, all my life, just to mention my background, all my life I've been part of Islamic movements and worked with Islamic movements. So I know a lot about this subject. Yeah, maybe too much, more about this subject than other subjects. And one thing I will say is people before they join Islamic movements, serious movements. I'm not talking about organizing picnics. If you're joining a serious movement, you need to get your inner work sorted out.
That's right.
You need to get yourself sorted out because what's going to happen is you're going to have this gaping hole of lack of recognition by your parents, lack of validation by your parents, and then you go to this group and it tells you your mom and dad are a mubtadi'. Your mom and dad they don't know Tawheed, Rububiyyah, Uluhiyyah, Asma wa Sifat. They don't know that even basics of Tawheed. So what happens is you get this inflated view of yourself because the group focuses on otherization. But before I get to the entering the group point, which is through manipulation, love bombing, otherization, and other things, I do want to mention what you mentioned, which is when you come from a family that is broken,
Yep.
or has
Not
major
supportive.
challenges, not
Yeah.
supportive. Unfortunately, what that means is that you have a gaping hole that very easily any sense of belonging could fill to satisfy that need. And with respect, before we talk about the group exploiting that, and the groups do exploit that, but we also have to say that there is such a thing in Islam, and I know, Ustad, we speak about this a lot, of individual responsibility
So,
as a Muslim. With
very true.
respect, you're a grown adult. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. When you see a group filling that gaping hole, you need to gain the self-awareness to know that I don't actually believe in anything. I just don't like being alone. I actually don't believe in all this stuff you're talking about. I just do it because compared to being alone, I'd rather be around with these people because it becomes my social group. You see, no, you join any Islamic movement or even a mosque, youth outreach because you want to help for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. You don't do it because you want to be popular. You don't want to do it because you want validation. You should do it because Islam tells you that you should only do things purely for pure reasons. Right? إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى. And this لكل امرئ ما نوى might be what you get. You remember, there is a susceptibility of the abusee that sometimes perfectly complements the abuser, right? And we are not blaming the abusee, but we want the abusee to be ready to not be abused because we cannot, you know, if you can't remove all the bad things in the world that your sons are going to face, I think the better thing you could do is just prepare your sons to face the bad world, right? It makes common sense that sons, I can't fix the world. So the
Yeah.
best thing I can do is equip you to face a world that is not the one I wanted, not the one I wanted for you. So
As we are
similarly,
encouraged to raise our kids for times different than our times. I don't know
exactly,
what they're going to be facing with
exactly,
the emergence of AI and all other technologies. I don't know what my kids will be facing and what their kids will be facing. So, like you said, equip them to face whatever that's going to come their way, and
absolutely.
that will ease my own
Emotionally and
anxiety.
intellectually.
Yes, صحيح.
I'm
صحيح.
going to say something that I found psychologists that I've spoken to in the past take a great interest in, but it was my own personal discovery, right? So I have no white papers that I've written on this, but just life experience. I
Mhm.
found, Ustada, that there are sociological reasons, and therefore not to do with the individual, like zoom out, that sometimes when people are selecting groups, that they're not selecting groups. The groups are selecting them. You didn't
Mhm.
choose your group, the group chose you. So, for example, if you come from a background where you're quite, you were on the street, gang fights, postcode fights, war, drugs and gangs and fights, you tend to want to join a group that is potentially jihadi, right? Because you think the way to solve a problem is to crack some heads. So there's this very, I'm not saying that that is the reason given by the group, even. Let's get this very clear.
Yeah,
But what happens is what is appealing to you is
yeah.
you're seeing a reflection of something about yourself. كَمَا تَكُونُ يُوَلَّ عَلَيْكُمْ. So what's
But it's
happening
but
is,
it's honestly at one point you are choosing them.
yeah, you're choosing
You
them,
gravitated
but
towards them.
you have to decide how well informed were you in exercising your choice? That
Mm.
actually you grew up in a violent environment, so a violent expression of Islam is appealing because you grew up in a violent
It's
environment,
normal. Yeah,
right?
it's what you know.
There's others who were steeped into cultural harms within their Islamic families, right? So
Mhm.
when they find an Islam that is black and white, everything is bid'ah. There's no something as culture. There's no al-urfu yu'tabar. There's no urf is considered. Nothing. It's all Quran
That's how
and
they're going to
Sunnah,
grow
black and
up
white.
to be.
They're going to, and if you're someone who was emotionally repressed, as in you buried your emotions because dealing with them were too painful, it's very easy to join a group that says everything is about the concepts, everything is about the mafahim, everything is about the ideas. The ideas don't connect with your heart. It's just all up here, ideas within the abstract. So I think a lot of people who think they chose their group, right? And the reason why I'm saying it in this way, do you know, and I'll tell you why I'm saying it this way, because I want to undercut and undermine the certainty of the cult member. I'll repeat that for those who listen because I want this clear as day. I want to undercut and undermine the that certain look in the face of some people, right? You're
Mhm.
not as certain as you think you are, my friend. What you are is, for example, you are South Asian, right? South Asians in the States, they got a bad name in college and university. Actually, I didn't even go to university in America, but I can tell you that within a certain generation, they were looked at as like Apu from The Simpsons. He wasn't kind of the guy who got the girl, the South Asian guy. If you're black, you can pass off as African American and all that. If you're black Muslim, if you're kind of like Croatian or something, you can pass off as a Turkish. You
Right.
can pass. white Muslim. If you're a certain level, I don't know, of Arab, some of them, I don't know why the guys try to look like Italians, but you know, I think you might have seen this happen, right? There's some
Yes.
strange phenomena there as well, right?
Italian, Spanish.
Yeah, they start going, you know, like, and I'm like, hey, you're from Lebanon, chill out. But the point is they have this thing where they adopt certain things. But the brown guy is Apu from The Simpsons,
It's outside.
right? Right? And unfortunately, it's very difficult. Only now you get certain comedians who are Asians now, yeah. Was it Hassan Minhaj and others, right? But generally, Asians were considered as like, you know, the unpopular one, you know, the unpopular guy or the thing. So what happens is when someone comes and tells you, oh, you're not from South Asia, you're not from where the land of Apu from Simpsons, you are part of a civilization that lasted for 1,350 years, that dominated from China to Spain, and you are part of this grand nation. And also, that's valuable. I think that's important as our Islamic heritage, that we are part of a nation that spanned from China to Spain. But the problem is, he uses that as a way to feel superiority over everybody else and thinks, yeah, now I'm a somebody. Yeah, you guys just thought I was Apu from The Simpsons. And that draws him. Why a lot of South Asians gravitate towards that group is because of actually that you are South Asian diaspora, and that you have this disconnect that you're not quite Asian, you know, back home. You're not, so you have to try even harder to be,
To fit in.
to fit in, to be American, right? And so you'll see some people from certain backgrounds have to work harder to be part of the wider atmosphere,
Culture or
the culture of
society.
society. So I find that if you're, for example, someone who loves culture and doesn't want to abandon it, right? And you love culture, and I'm not, by the way, I'm not questioning the fiqh, and I'm not questioning intentions here. Psychology isn't about necessarily how pure your intention is, and it's not about the fiqh. We're just talking
Yeah.
about how the mind works on a sociological level. So there are some English reverts, right? Right? Some English or white reverts, you could say, converts. No one say revert anymore. It's convert, right? Converts, where because they want to hold on to their heritage and the dominant culture, because they haven't faced racism, right? Right? They might lean more towards becoming Sufis than Salafis, because you get to, you know, music is allowed, you get the guitar and you get the this and you
Well,
know.
it depends. If they are African American converting, they have faced racism.
Yes,
If
then they have. Then they have.
depends on who
So,
they are.
but I'm
Yeah.
talking about sociological. I'm talking about
Oh, okay,
literally.
psychological. Okay,
So if
got
you're
it.
like, if you're, for example, face racism, whether you're South Asian or African American, right? African American, South Asian American. If you face racism, it's very easy for a hardline religion, or sorry, a hardline group that says everyone is inferior, they're all going to pay jizya one day. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're just dhimmis. You know,
yeah. That's
that
not going to sit
gives,
well with them.
it's a way to otherize others to make you feel
Yeah.
good about all the racism you faced. But the real reason is because you didn't deal with the racism you faced.
So,
If you deal with the racism you face, you would have realized that these people you look down on, these are the very people that you wish Islam for them, that you wish that they become your brothers and sisters in Islam, and that you recognize the good that they have. So one of the biggest problems of cults, there's so many things to say, is that you cannot recognize the good in someone else because you've otherized them. So you can't, if you say, tell me one good thing, if you're of one sect, if you always say what's good, one good thing about the other sect, you can't say anything. If you say, what's one good thing about non-Muslims? What's one good thing about Christians? Nope, I can't say anything good about Christians. Are you sure you can't say anything good about
do
Christians?
you think it's because they don't know, or they can't because that's how they were indoctrinated?
It's the otherization to the extreme
Which
that
is
has
one of the
caused
characteristics of the cult, is the others. The
ajib, right?
others. Yeah.
Ajib, because in the Quran, Allah praises Christians and says these people are softer people. So the majority of the
Very
states
true.
is the Bible Belt, although it's a Judeo-Christian country that you're in, it's mostly Christian, isn't it? The population is mostly Christian.
Yes.
So they should know that in the Quran, Allah praises the Christians. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you that, you know, these people, they're actually quite soft in mawadda, they're gentler people than others, right? Meaning that they will be receptive. Now, does that mean all Jews and mushriks are? No, it's saying as a group, they have a wider culture that's more receptive and softer. You can find a good Jew, you can find a good mushrik, you can find a good Hindu or whatever. But the issue is if you're so busy otherizing people, how are you going to help them and connect with them? Like, how can you help anyone you can't connect with? So let's list them down for the listeners because I've said a lot. One is exploitation of the gaps you have in your identity.
Mm-hmm.
Another is exploitation of what we could call family trauma, family-based trauma,
The
that
background you come
you are
from.
lured towards feminism because you had a brown dad with a beard. So now anyone brown and a beard, and if he's brown and a beard and he's like religious, man, he's a triple threat, right? He's a triple
Well,
threat.
it depends on how that relationship was. He could be brown and bearded Muslim man, but he's very gentle and
He
compassionate
can,
with them.
but we're
Yeah,
assuming he's bad. Let's assume
depends.
in the
Yeah.
example he's bad. But if he's bad, it's wrong, Ustada Isra, to assume even for a moment that anyone else who's brown, who's got a beard and is Muslim, is the tyrant like your dad was, or the tyrant like your husband was, or whoever. That's wrong to do that. That's like me saying I had an experience where I was mugged in the street, and it happened to be someone who was African American or black skin. And now I look at every black person and think,
You
no,
jump every time you
that's
see.
racism.
Yeah.
So the whole point of it in Islam is ta'assub is a catch-all term. Any form of ta'assub where a collectivism makes you feel right superior based on other than what Allah has revealed, then that is something we need to remove from ourselves. So the biggest cult of all is to say, and that's, I think this conversation was prompted by me and then you, on why I said this, this kind of patriotism that we find a bit icky, right? That I don't mind someone saying, I love my people, I love living in America, I love that I can practice my deen, I love my neighbors. But this idea of, like really loving your nation and putting the flag up and be careful. Those are the same people who killed 1 million people, the government, I mean, specifically.
Yes.
1 million of your co-religionists in Iraq, right? And millions of people they've armed to kill your people. They have starved people through oil for gas, oil for food, and medicine for oil for medicine. Which I can't remember her name now. She's passed away recently, or not so recently. Well, the American Senate, she said it was worth it. They asked her if the oil for gas.
Oh,
You know who I'm talking about. And they
Thatcher.
asked her if it was.
Thatcher.
No, I think someone else.
She.
It will come to
No.
me, right?
Yeah.
But she said it was worth it, right?
Yeah. I can't
So,
remember.
so these people, we need to be very careful that the biggest cult is asabiya, nationalism. Yeah, the Prophet ﷺ declared an Arab is not better than a non-Arab. Yeah, that the white is not better than the black, and the black is not better than the brown. And also notice how his paradigm wasn't the one that you have in Britain and America. He didn't say the white is not better than the black and say ma salama. Yeah, ablaq bukra. He didn't say that. What he said is, and the black isn't superior to the white, knowing that the trauma of how you're treated can turn the other way around. And the greatest example for that is Banu Israel, who are a traumatized nation. Yeah, they were traumatized. They were, they were treated as slaves by
Just to make the
Fir'aun.
distinction, Banu Israel who are mentioned in the Quran are not the same as Israel today.
Yes, of course. Yeah, the Banu Israel are the 12 tribes from the sons of Yaqub alayhi salam. Yeah, and those people, they were oppressed by Pharaoh, but when they were freed, one would argue, surely, that if you face trauma, you are an expert on trauma. La, not in Islam.
Only if you process the trauma.
Only if you process the trauma correctly. Agreed. And I think that's one thing that I think people need to realize. Just because you've gone through something doesn't make you an expert on how to solve that thing.
Nor it makes you come out of it on your own. Sometimes you need some processes, some remedies, some tazkiyah.
I mean, the trauma can be great raw material to make you empathetic, much better than a person who doesn't have the raw material.
Very true.
I will agree with that to the cows come home. But just because you faced something doesn't mean oh my God, I've discovered justice by myself. It's not like that. Justice comes from al-adl, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So again, this boundary issue is is something that we need to reconcile. That if we're going to use the word cult and define it as controlling, pervasive, manipulative. Have you seen the media in America lately? How the media has treated Abdullah Saeed, how
Yes,
the media
yes,
treated.
yes.
So the media, last time I
Sad to
checked,
see all the Islamophobes and all the
right?
derogatory terms and all the racism. But it's sometimes things need to come to the surface in order for us to generate something new.
That's right. So
As the Prophet ﷺ said, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ, all the affairs of the believer is khair. So
ضراء
whatever
سراء.
is coming up,
نعم.
it needs to bubble up for us to look at and really address it. And mashallah, he's very bold in addressing it. So
Yes.
may Allah grant him success.
I mean, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve him. And
I mean,
one of the things I found is like within those circles, you have Muslims engaging on various political levels, right? So you have people like me, right, who are how do I describe myself? Should have taken more time thinking about this one. Uh, I would be
thousands of people are listening, so we just want to see how you describe yourself.
asystemically political. Now, because then I'll get in
Okay?
trouble. I need to be accurate.
No.
I'm asystemically political, right? I've never voted in my life, and I don't intend to. But if someone else views that that is correct, then you do your thing, right? You do your thing. Let's see where it ends up. Let's see what it produces, and all of those things. That's my personal Islamic view, right?
Let me stop
But
you there for a minute, please, if I may. So the choices you make for yourself can be very challenging for someone, let's say, who works for higher ed or for corporate America or for an institution. Do you feel that the freedom that you have enabled you to do the things that you want to do, and mashallah, and lead the way that you want to lead? But as Muslims who work for organizations and institutions who are limited in expressing themselves as such, where do you think they need to be? Or start with their own spirituality and their own, like owning who they are as Muslims?
what kind of institutions are you referring to? You mean
It could be
university or?
any sect, like business sects or educational sects or medicine.
I mean, for me, there's like three levels of the Muslim community, right?
Okay.
There's the community, which is the grassroots community, and you have the masajids, and you have the youth clubs, and the outreach work, and all of that stuff, right? The grassroots work. Then you have the level of like no that so you have the grassroots, which is just the community itself. Then you have the institutions, right? And you have the Islamic groups and mosques and MSAs and mosque councils and fatwa councils and so on. Then you have another tier, which is kind of like the ones who are and those mosques and those imams and scholars, they're all engaging with politicians to some degree or not, whether people know or don't know. I know they are, right? One way or another, planning
Meaning
permission to.
supporting them and guiding them and
Well,
donating and all of that.
well, in one way or another. Some will go as far as saying give them your zakat, yeah, which I'll disagree with. Some
Oh, I
will,
see.
go as far as saying that this counselor or this person, we need to keep good cordial relationship with them so they understand what the Muslim community is doing, so that they don't allow like right-wing views to kind of culminate in their mind, and we need to be more open and transparent, and we need to have interfaith conversation. So that's kind of like the mid-range. Then the higher level is where you got your I don't know how we ended up with this, but the Mamdanis and the Abdullah Saeed, that kind of Hassan Manhaj and Hassan Paika, and I think Hassan Paika and all this kind of that generation. So that's the generation that field is, like, personally, that's the step too far, right? The other generation that interacts with and does interfaith and speaks to politicians and secures rights for Muslims in the workplace, prayer spaces, all of these things. That's not for me. That's not an issue whatsoever. Yeah, I encourage that. To be honest with you, that we shouldn't be in like a closed off little world. You shouldn't be like a Muslim world inside a non-Muslim country. That you need to have ways of communicating and so on. And then you just have the grassroots community, which are doing,
Yeah.
families and so on. So you've got families, institutions, and government. So I would say
So
that
go ahead.
you mentioned a tier within the corporate world, like in terms of larger companies and all of these things. So anyone within the corporate world, if they have the money to fund a political campaign, that money should be used to actually build more grassroots services to preserve the Muslim community. Because I found in America, from my experience of speaking to people there and speaking to people who run some of the largest institutes in America, by the way, if I might add, if I might add, that sometimes the institutions are getting bigger and bigger, but for the sake of engaging with the political structures, the message of Islam is getting more and more diluted and more nothing. And in the MSAs as well. So the people in the MSAs have told me as well, not just in the UK. I've got, alhamdulillah, I've got connections in various places. And the message of Islam in the MSAs is, yeah, it's Muslim friendly, pizza nights, this nights, but there's nothing kind of hardcore. It's seen as almost threatening that if you want to say Islam secures Islam secures the rights of women better than feminism can do. What's wrong with that statement? That's a clear statement. Because if feminism can do, then there's something wrong with Islam. And if feminism is exactly Islam, then just call it Islam. There's no need to borrow unless you are faqir of something of your own. So what I would say is that middle class, the doctor generation who keep owning all your mosque committees in the States, right? All those doctors. What they need to do is they need to put their money together to mobilize the madaris and to mobilize the communities into building more stronger Muslim identities and more foundational understanding of what Islam as a deen is, whilst convincing the Muslims to be the greatest exemplars of contributors within the lands that they live in. You cannot pretend I'm not from here when you live there. When you're there, you need to be benefiting those people. All this thing of any minute I don't like something, I want to do hijrah. Yeah? No, you're here. You can't be in the first in the line for the benefits and last in the line to help that society. Many Muslims during COVID, they didn't do what you did. Many Muslims, to our embarrassment, that they just hid in their homes and stocked up tins of beans, like as if, nuclear fallout, and they just cared about themselves. When actually, we could have exemplified kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas and go like we did. We, alhamdulillah, by God's grace, we had food banks open. I was giving classes for entire schools that were shut down. I didn't charge a penny. I did entire, classes, it was called Quran in the Cave, for schools that had no way to facilitate further learning, and their children were festering at home and their parents were shouting at them, and marital problem, everything was kicking off. Even when I was teaching some of the kids, there were parents shouting in the background, God help them, because of the tense feeling of everyone just being stuck inside a home. So I would emphasize that. I don't agree with that, but one thing is again, will I now say he's not Muslim, he hasn't got best interest of Muslims at heart? No, I'd say let's let the Ummah decide here what ultimately will serve the interests of the Muslims best, number one. And number two, ultimately we'll let Allah decide when we die, right? Those are the two things. And cultishness is to now say all of these people are kuffar, all of these people are traitors, all of these people are this, that, and the other, where takfir is probably one of the greatest tools of cultishness, right? In the hands of people who really don't understand that takfir is such a specialized tool, right, that you need so many a'dhar, so many excuses, al-udru bil-jahal and so many other things for you to declare. But I find that the more overarching point of our discussion there, putting aside American politics, I was happy for the Muslims that Abdullah Said won, and that the Muslims feel that they can secure their rights better, and they feel that 69 million pounds of AIPAC money went down the toilet. How can I not be happy about that? But
and you have to keep in mind, when he gets into Senate, he will be the first Muslim Senate.
Yes.
And he can have the opportunity to run for president. I wanted to go back to the question I asked you, and it's never to put you on the spot.
Sure.
I just wanted to diversify our conversations to all the people who will listen to it,
Yes.
from different backgrounds and different spiritual levels. Here when I deal with MSA groups, especially in higher ed, there are people who are afraid to engage in certain topics if it's introduced, or certain speakers if that person is invited, or certain activities on campus, simply because of where they see themselves later on in their careers. They don't want to be associated with certain things. Not that it's not that it's bad. It's just they don't want to challenge anything. They want to make sure that they will get to where they want to be. And that takes us back to the point which we're making. One must work on their inner self, on their own spirituality, so that heart will be cultivated with goodness and benefits, and they will know their directions, they will know their compass, rather than I need to be different to fit in somewhere. I need to
Yeah,
be different to earn something. And to know that their path is already laid out by Allah, they just need to go through it.
absolutely. I think this is where people got to realize or question themselves. Am I on the rebound from something? From something. We
Mhm,
don't know what it is, but you need to ask yourself, because ikhlas uh, requires you to know whether you're doing something on the rebound. I'm going to open up on this, that, yeah, I've been, helping the community and all that for 25, whatever years. And if I
mhm,
look at myself, someone might look at this do-gooder, thinks he's a goody two-shoes, right? And this, so I question myself, what's my motivation? Is it because I wanted to prove a point? Is it because, something I faced in my childhood? Is it
mhm.
because, do you see, it's something that you have to regularly do muhasabah on and
Yes,
question your
muhasabah, there was
intentions,
just
right?
retrospect and
And
sit with
unfortunately,
yourself and
what
ask
I've
yourself.
found is like, if you got an ISOC, we're in a difficult situation. If you have an ISOC, we call them ISOCs, you call them MSAs, yeah,
Oh,
ISOC,
okay.
right? Tomato, tomato, tomato. But the issue is when we have these ISOCs or MSAs, sometimes they won't invite someone that they like, but they
Yep.
can't because of the pressure they will face. But
Yep.
here's the problem. There's one thing, which is I haven't been invited to certain places because they might think I'm controversial, yeah, which is fine. Me personally, I'd be like, as long as you get to preserve your ISOC, and then so be it.
Very
I
good.
wouldn't
I
want you
like
to, I don't want you to burn down your Islamic society for the sake of inviting me. Point number one.
that.
But
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that that guy, that brother, or that sister has not a duty to the ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't fear the people, fear me.
Hmm.
And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will facilitate a path, which means that anytime I see a system that where I'm now blackballing, I am now gatekeeping and keeping certain speakers away because they might seem a bit too strong on feminism, a bit too strong against red pill, a bit too controversial or political. We want to have, happy Islam, right? Happy Muslim.
Yep.
If that person does that, that person in their conscience should say to themselves, I must pass my degree, I must earn a good amount of money so that I can then form something that is independent of these structures. That is what every Muslim should be doing. But unfortunately, Muslims do not take that step. The minute they finish, they are part of that structure. Then they're part of another structure that says, well, at least we can do this amount of Islam. And then, well, at least we can do. So, like, even if someone on the road to becoming president, yeah, there was one president with a middle name that was Hussein, right?
Hmm.
And he was known as the drone bomber. He has droned more civilians than any president in the history of the United States.
And
He
he's seen as
makes
a hero.
he makes some of the other presidents look like pacifists.
Hmm.
So, unfortunately, it's not necessarily about charisma. It's about policies. It's not
Hmm.
necessarily about your internal faith, actually. It's to do with your message. Your message is that I want to secure Muslim rights of hijab, for example. Let's pick on hijab. I want to secure Muslim rights of hijab based on the fact that we have freedom of expression. And part of freedom of expression within that bracket is how you dress. If, for example, like in France, they determined that under freedom of expression, your hijab is actually a threat to our institutions, then you would have to agree that the hijab should be taken off because that is the basis in which you convince people to take the hijab off. That's the issue I'm saying. I'm not saying that there are policies that are Muslim friendly and there are policies that are Islamophobic. But what we need to be careful is that ultimately you're pitching yourself as a socialist, which is a split, or a capitalist. He says, I'm a capitalist. Okay, capitalist socialist. But you're projecting a certain worldview that within it, despite it being pushing against the existent government structures, will only replace it. This is why people say the casino and the house always wins. Ultimately, whether you're we live in a duopoly, especially you guys, you also live in a duopoly. You have two major parties which ultimately are funded from both sides by the same people, the same military industry complex, the same the corporate, the major 7 companies that own every company, Smith Klein and this and that. The same APACs fund both sides. So what
It's end up
happened in
being
the,
like a political competition.
yeah, and what happened in the UK? What happened in the? By the way, we're just having a nice chat now, me and Ustad Iman. Everyone can just get a cup of tea.
Chill.
So just chill. But because we're talking about cults, even if we cover this topic and we cover it well, we have inshallah many classes ahead of us. But
Inshallah.
I think the macro cult needs to be addressed, because otherwise we become self-hating Muslims, where we think everything's a patriarchy, everything's a there are flying monkeys. Flying monkeys
But
are
you're
the
not saying we need to impose Islam on others. That's not
No.
what you're saying.
What I'm saying is to recognize that non-Islam is being imposed on you.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. That we
Yes.
need to be, if you're going to talk about controlling cultures, you need to deal with the big papa of them all. And the biggest, most manipulative flying monkey is actually Western media, right? That is the biggest form of flying monkey. I mean, that's not just flying monkeys. That's like flying monkeys on jet planes, on jet rockets. So we have to, because if we don't do that, what we do is we give the wider milieu of our society a pass. Oh, that's just okay. And then we dig into Islam and we inadvertently start applying, that cultishness that we gave a pass on. We start using those values to start now having a go. But we must be just, Ustada. And if we're just, we're going to bring the fire and we're going to bring the heat to everything, right? We're going to bring it, and because that's what Islam requires us to say, even if it's against your own self. And I think that it's important to appreciate that if someone, for example, says my politics, my siyasa Islamiyya, is that I serve my community. You know one thing about politics in Islam, it's not hakim and mahkum. It's not government does politics and we are just that's not how Islam looks at it. Islam views that picking litter off the floor is politics. Building an orphanage is politics. Building a masjid is politics, right? So politics in Islam is tasusuhum al-anbiya, meaning that the anbiya, whatever the Anbiya did was politics. That's what the Sahih Bukhari hadith refers to. Kanat banu Israel tasusuhumul anbiya. So whenever we do politics, any form of just because you're not part of the legislature does not mean you're not doing politics. An imam who served his community for 40 years, solving everyone's marital problems and divorce problems and fasq and khulas and identity issues and every other issue in the world. He was one of the greatest politicians that many Americans, Muslims, may not have given credit to, because they viewed him as, he's just imam. But actually, that imam did politics at its greatest form. So although I disagree, I do believe that politics is varied. But what I'm saying is that if you don't do one or the other, it is cultish to view as the other person as you're the enemy of the Muslims because you don't vote, right? You're the enemy of the Muslims because you did vote. That's the point that's the nub, isn't it, Ustada? That's the core of this discussion. You voted, good for you. You didn't vote, good for you. But don't say you don't care about the Muslims. So Ustada, I've been working for 25 years, man and boy. Because I didn't vote, I never cared for my community. I didn't serve 3-4 days a week of my life, gave my children and my wife to this community when I could have sat in domestic bliss, watching TV and just chilling and just ordering out. That means I'm not a good politician. It's not, I didn't serve my people, my community, my non-Muslim counterparts. It's not right. So this is where one could have a
But I
conscious.
think the other perspective would be you were passive in giving your voice, in passive in moving things forward for for politicians. It could be it's seen that way.
It's seen that way because of that person's worldview, not because they have a right to truth with a
True,
capital T.
true.
Because last time I checked, so let's look at my Muslim community. We are the most densely populated Muslim community in Europe. So I think I have, with my demographic that where I reside, I sit right now, I sit in the most densely, I think the first top three most densely populated cities within the Western world. So I like to think I sit in a place that has good way of expressing this point. 90% of all good that has happened for the welfare of the Muslims, 95% of the welfare of the Muslims has not been based on who we voted for. With respect,
It's what we do.
all the land that was bought freehold was not bought by a politician. It was bought by Muslims who became rich and bought the land as sadaqah jariyah so we can bury us. All of the circumcision clinics or whatever were built by Muslim doctors who provided that service. So from circumcision to death and everything in between, all of the madaris, they were built by government funding, government funds? Nope. They were built on Muslims who paid their sadaqah, to the masjid. 95 or 98% of all institutions that serve the welfare of the Muslims where you live, I am guessing now because I don't like to, I only know my, what they say, Ahlu Makkah, يعرفون أحوالهم, right? You know your matters best, umurahum. 95% of all khair, safeguarding of the welfare of the Muslims was built by Muslims who just paid and donated and brought their imams and paid for everything and all that.
Very
There was no
true.
government funding. Your madaris, your funeral places, the places of circumcision, you name it, the Islamic schools, everything that is good in the state that you live in that is run by Muslims was funded by the generosity of the hard-working Muslims who often probably don't speak in very eloquent ways, probably don't have degrees like you and I. They're probably, first, second generation, maybe they did Uber driving, maybe they were Uber drivers. They're not the middle class intelligentsia. They are people who are hardworking people that at Salatul Jum'ah, they put in £5. You times that by thousands and thousands and thousands of people over decades and decades, you get massive real estate that was purchased by the hardworking Muslims of America, which was purchased by the hardworking Muslims of Britain. It wasn't done based on the Muslim brown person we voted for, but rather those places that we built apolitically, might I add. Those places, because when we sought planning permission, did we seek Muslim planning permission or just planning permission? When we sought compliance or charity status, did we seek Muslim charity status or charity status that they have to afford the Jews and the Christians? Did they give us charity status because they love the Muslims or because they afforded it to Jewish and Christian communities? They allowed you to do that because they allow everyone else to do that. Did we buy real estate, freehold land, because they love the Muslims? Or is it central to a capitalist economy, the concept of capital and ownership, that a man or woman, if they work hard, they can own things, right? And so we end up owning so many things in the Western world because we worked hard and we put our money together and we bought these places. It was never, even if the politician now speaks at the mimbar of the biggest masjid in your state, he never built that masjid. It was the hard-working Muslim community, and no politician paid the money. Most mosques will even turn away grants for funding their masjid because they know that the Muslim community will provide that anyway. You see, usually
Nice.
grants from governments have, like in the UK, they offer me grants all the time. I've got grants coming out my ears. But every grant comes with, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to spy on Muslims, you need to
Conditional grants.
conditional. Even when they say there's no conditions, once you swallow it and it's in your belly, then they come with the conditions after. It's crazy, right? So again, in terms of intra-Muslim political activism, right? It can be cultish when a person's saying that any Muslim who doesn't engage in politics from a systemic point of view or an asystemic point of view is now the reason why the Muslims are suffering. That I hopefully I've actually rebutted that point quite hopefully um, efficiently, because when they say you're passive, with respect, those passive people funded 98% of the history of all Islamic institutes within probably the state you're in right now. It was not done by a generous politician. It was done mostly by hardworking laborers, and the committees were most likely doctors and lawyers, usually is the case, at least in the UK. But that was funded by the Muslims. It wasn't funded by any Democrat party or subsidiary of the Democrat Party. In fact, they're using those masajids as platforms for their canvassing and their political advocacy. So, with respect, where the passive, asystemic institutions are doing more for the systemic Muslims who are engaging with the government more than they're doing back. So, I'm
I
quietly,
appreciate your perspective on this.
and you're
Have a
welcome to
lot of
disagree. We're
students in
still brother
higher
and
ed.
sister in Islam.
No, we have a lot of students in higher ed
Yes.
who, because they didn't take the time to understand who they are as Muslims,
Mm,
for their identity as Muslims, they can very much argue with you that in order for Muslims to be beneficial in society, they need to be part of all aspects of society.
mm.
And there's good, there's bad. I understand where you're coming from, but it's very important for that person to be standing on solid ground spiritually and religiously
I
for them
agree.
to choose differently, right?
That's it, and not to
So
otherize others. You see,
yes,
that's the
not to
most that
and not to
this
put
is the biggest
down.
issue.
Yeah. I
I
think
don't.
there is a lot of disconnection between today's youth and all the efforts that were done with the older generation Muslims in the West, that they don't understand the hard work that has been done by the community, by the individuals, by the
Absolutely,
professionals
absolutely.
to establish everything that is there for the community to
Yeah, I
benefit
mean,
from.
the 95% of good, like I said, if they were to think that that was through political engagement, it would be ahistorical, firstly. Secondly, um, as I said, most likely if our children were praying, avoiding haram, avoiding fahisha and all of those things, I would be more grateful to them than some politician in terms of the impact of my children. And so, in a real lived experience, a lot of people have benefited from Muslims engaging in politics when they used politics in the more, let's say, more religious vernacular. That would point towards the fact that actually you've been experiencing a lot of politics, maybe not from a legislature
Mhm,
point of view, but
mhm.
you've been experiencing politics from an Islamic point of view, where your own children are now no longer going down the hole of God knows what rabbit hole in this society you can fall in. There are numerous. So, but uh, I
So
think
as
the
we
most.
discuss this, let's
Mm,
go ahead, sorry.
sure. No, I would conclude, if we both agree, that the main point is we were discussing macro cultishness of
Yeah,
a society that wants us to prove that we're one of them, and we have to adopt their values and ideas to the extent that we have to refer to problems within their paradigms. So I don't have to refer to,
very
for example, what happens in Palestine through a Democrat lens. I can refer to it as this is just genocidal or this is wrong according to Islam. I don't have to agree to two-state solution to sound like a soft Muslim Democrat. I can just say that all of that is occupied land, and any land that is occupied should be returned to its original owners. I don't care what color you wear. That is my belief, that any Muslim or any human being has a right to their land that was stolen from them. Going back to the original point is, if then people seek different pathways, what we shouldn't do is otherize, because that is a form of cultishness. To otherize someone who's asystemically political like me, for example, I mean, I didn't want to pick on me, but that's fine, right? I can take it. But if it was me that people were criticizing, and I know people do, by the way, then I'm like, so I wasn't
then you're
within,
doing something good. If people are
I'm probably doing
criticizing
something good.
you, then you're
Right.
doing something good.
I might be doing something right. So the issue is we shouldn't, because otherwise we're going to end up like the house servant and the field servant, if you know what I mean, right? Because what happens is Muslims are starting to police other Muslims and saying, you're not patriotic enough, you're making us look bad, you're not voting, you're doing this, you're too
We're
extreme.
diluting the unity
Yeah,
that
so
brings.
why do I need the right wing to silence me, to gatekeep, to cancel me when the Muslims are doing a perfectly good job by proxy? So
I
this is
see.
the problem a lot of Muslims in America and Britain need to think about, that if you're doing the work of silencing certain voices, you're not saying, look, we're doing one way. You know, you guys who believe in da'wah and unity and all of this stuff, you're focusing on a field that we're not focusing on. And we're focusing on using the apparatus of the state to better secure, right, the rights of Muslims. We'll do our thing and you'll do your thing. But
And
one
they
fact I
both are
found,
right. And they
sorry?
both are good. They're
They
both,
both
they,
have khair in them. But the
yes,
issue,
yes,
but the issue is that one can view the other as this is an incorrect approach, and the other can
yes,
view as the other is incorrect approach. But what shouldn't be done is then to strip that person of their Muslimness and their identity and say he's not a Muslim, she's not a
no,
Muslim, yeah,
mm,
or another way to strip a Muslim. We know that we take concern about others as part of our religion. You know, in ishtaka aynuhu ishtaka kullu, if the eye hurts, the rest of it hurts. So if anyone were to come up to me and say, you don't care about the Muslims because you didn't vote, that is stripping me of my Muslim identity.
that's right.
That is stripping me of my
Both
sense
can
of,
be right at the same time and can exist together.
I mean, they can both be respected and tolerated,
Yeah,
but they can't, and they can both be right in some aspects, but they
صحيح.
can also be wrong and
In a
outright
lot of
wrong.
aspects,
And we
yes.
can just say, I think you're wrong. You know, I don't mind. Like, you know, when I meet politicians, I don't become like, because I meet politicians, I pray them, they're my local mosque. I meet the
MashaAllah.
elected politician in my local mosque all the time. We shake hands, we hug, we talk. He knows what I'm like, and I know what he's like. And he's one of the most senior people in this community. I pray with him every other day. I meet him in the masjid. And we're cool beans, you know, we're okay with each other. And the reason is because I respect that, you know, he's trying to facilitate certain things for the Muslims, and he respects that I'm trying to facilitate. But what happens is when you start policing Muslims as extreme based on liberal definitions, then you are internalizing that cult, number one. And number two, if you are takfiring people because they're engaging in something, that doesn't make them non-Muslim, frankly. It makes them maybe mistaken at best.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, at best. Then you are also internalizing a cultish mindset,
that's right.
because you are now denying a Muslim of his right to be part of this community called the Muslim community on the basis of your little group and how it defines who is allowed to be part of this VIP club and who's not a part. But do you see, this is a more, although we wanted to get into groups, maybe that's part three and the next one will be part four. But one thing I will say is the macro cult of the individual and the cult of society is definitely something that Muslims need to recognize. Because if we're going to just go and flagellate and whip Islam, like, you know, just whip Islam, Islam is controlling, Islam is this. Have you had a look at your own society? How free do you really think you are? You're only free within a very narrow purview of what life is. You know, when we think of deen, we don't think it's sajda and fasting. We think it's far more than that. It's so encompassing, because when we view the secular, Muslims understand what the secular is. It's the temporal world we live in, and we understand the divine as the eternal, right? We don't view that the temporal and the secular never shall the twain meet. We believe that the secular, because it is makhluk from the Khaliq, we believe the secular is subsumed into the knowledge and the power of the divine. We don't believe that we are just these cosmic orphans. We believe this world, this material world, is imbibed with divine purpose, right? To be Khalifa fil ard. We believe that when we call for right and we forbid what's wrong, it's not to exalt ourselves above other people. It's because we truly want to see the best way mankind can organize themselves according to the way the Creator sees it. And so what happens is a lot of the time when we talk about freedom and justice and equality, we are using liberal terms that are universalized over all Muslims, when ironically, Ustada, Islam views justice and all those and you know, justice and
Mhm.
equality or whatever you want to call it, all of these, it has its own universal claim. Islam, most of the ayat, ya ayyuhan nas, it's not ya ayyuhal mu'minin, it's not oh yeah you Muslims, oh you believers, oh you a lot of the verses in the Quran is not a book for even Muslims. The book is for, is, has information for Muslims, but the Quran is a book for an-nas, rahmatan lil alameen. The Prophet ﷺ is not a rahmah for rahmatan lil mu'mineen. The Prophet ﷺ and his sunnah of how he engaged with society and community, you know, where he was offered power and they said, do you want power? He said, even if you put the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left, I will not share power with you. But the point being is, Muhammad ﷺ, it was not rahmatan lil muslimin. It's not this, you know, in this intersectional framing of Muslim minority, females are not a minority. They're half the world. But you know what I mean, right? Minorities, the poor, whoever it is, maybe oppressed groups. Let's put it at that. The Muslims are not just oppressed groups. They are shuhada ala nas. They are witnesses to justice for the entirety of what? Shuhada ala al-mu'minin or shuhada ala nas? Shuhada ala nas. Yeah? Ukhrijat lin nas. Shuhada ala nas. Rahmatan lil alameen. And Allah
They're
says,
so
Ya
first.
ayyuhan nas, u'budu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum. Yeah? All the verses show that the conceptualization of justice and goodness and fairness is a universal claim that will help all human beings, whereas the liberal understanding of these views are currently being expressed by Muslims as the universal view that all Muslims need to be viewed, which will then inherently police Muslims with differing views, which is another conversation. There's a lot of politics involved in that conversation. But
So, if
despite that,
given the description of a believer and the person who brings a difference and who makes a difference, if they find themselves in these cults, Mufti Marine, why do they stay? Why do healthy people stay? I wanted to say a few words about it, and I want to hear from you. So, why
Bismillah.
do smart people stay? One of the biggest misconception is only weak people join cults. They originally, like we have said, they did not join the cults. They did not know what they're getting themselves into. They did not know the premises of the rules and regulations. They just find themselves part of that. And initially, they love that they belong, that they are seen, they are part of something bigger than themselves. But later on, when they start waking up, when they start feeling that they're becoming more healthy, why do they keep staying? Because one of them are very highly educated, and you could attest to that from your experience that those people are not ignorant. They know what they're talking about. They're emotionally intelligent, they're successful, they're compassionate, they're spiritually committed. So leaving those people will cause the person to lose friends, lose the mentors and the routines and the culture that comes with that. It also can make them feel that they're leaving their identity, they're leaving who they are, and sometimes their families. If we're talking about that cult is the family, and they want to distance themselves because of whatever the family is doing, uh, that can cause them to leave families. And this is why healing often resembles a lot of grief. So when they leave, they feel heavy. Later on, we're going to talk about how do people leave. But I want to hear from you. Why do you think smart people stay or healthy people stay?
I think one of the things we've spent time, alhamdulillah, is covering what is inherent in the person that they take into the cult with them. That's the, we discussed that. So now I hope that suffices everyone. But there
Yes.
is this bridge on when you're joining something that is cultish. Like I said, I think you know, cult is kind of a strong word because of the connotation. Really, is someone who almost like has a godlike status. That's what a cult means. But we will both casually use the word cult and cultish, inshallah, interchangeably. But the definitionally, it's more like a godlike, all-encompassing kind of leader, which has a group that are completely blind, and so on. But what entices them initially is all the gaps in themselves. But what about Ustada? What entices them? I've seen people join groups because they see a father figure
Yep.
in the organization. Yeah, that this is the only time I feel validated by this father figure or a mother figure. There's usually a kind of a matriarch of within organizations as well. Sometimes there's a strong woman that everyone thinks, wow, you know, I feel safe, I feel protected, I feel
Yeah.
accepted, acknowledged. So there's that. There's the other thing, which is people describe as love bombing. Yeah, and I wanted to
Yes.
address that, which is pre-marriage, even in families where parents do with their children, and
And within
so
relationships, when, like you
in
said, when
relationships,
somebody's
it's
getting
a common
married.
trait. It's a common trait that expands into groups, marriages, and families. So,
Yeah.
and what we've noticed is that there's this over expression of love, right? That so I'm going to give my definition. I have not checked any definition. This is my one, right? So I just want to
Okay.
be. So it's like this over expression of love that overwhelms a person, right, and disarms that person from being critically aware of what's going on. Number one. Number two, what it does is it's given within the shakl, within the appearance, the appearance of that there is nothing wanted from it. That's the second. And the third is that ultimately there is a massive payback that is expected from that. Do you see? So it's kind of like to do that, to expect something at a later date. It's for a favor to be named later, right? That you will be blackmailed later. Do you see? So, for example, I've had people betray me. I've had people do bad things or whatever. And I think people will like, should I say to a person, hey man, I helped you get through the worst marriage situation in your life, and now you're slandering me, for example, yeah?
Yeah.
There's two problems, and there's one problem and one that's not a problem, yeah? One which is, in the Quran it says that you shouldn't tell people,
Yeah.
do things for people without reminding them what you
Yeah.
did for them, yeah? This is what you call the am.
Mannan, right?
Yes, the
Is it?
mannan. This is the am. But there is a khas that doesn't make you mannan, by the way. And Ibn Hazm said this as well. Yeah. Like, for example, let's pick on, because it's me, I'm going to pick on you a bit, because you're a mum, right? If you said to your child, right, where your child doubted that you loved them, for example, yeah, as an example, say they wouldn't you use the fact that you love them and what you did for them as a baseline, not that they owe you, but that you love them? Do you get the point? So you're not saying, hey, I fed and I clothed you and etc. And you say it in that tone, right? And yeah, and so you better marry who I say, right? Or something like this, right? Instead, what you say is, let me give so I'm accurate. I'm going to stay within the same question. Son, I've known you all your life, right? And there's aspects of you I don't know because you built of who you are outside of that in uni life and your friends. And I know there's this whole part of you that I don't know who you is, but I still know you, son, to a great degree. And as a result of that, when you make decisions about marriage, because of all what I've done, know that I have your best interest at heart. So please consider my opinions. That is not reminding, that's not being a manana.
Very true. It's very
I'm sorry, but
beautifully put.
that's not a manana. That's you
So,
using a baseline of love and trust and
yeah.
safety as a
Yeah.
baseline that, son, give my views 2 cents worth of value, son, because I know you think you know it all, but trust me, there are things you don't know. But just give me at least some, like a vote in this. Like even if you can veto it, give me some vote that, look, I met this potential daughter-in-law of mine, and it just might be the case that it might not be compatible with your personality because you are a bit of a passive guy. You can get run over quite quickly, and you need someone who is not going to be taking advantage of your giving nature. I'm just making stuff up, but the point
Yeah.
is this is not being manana. So we have to be very careful because people use religion to assert liberal claims of spiritual abuse, right?
Especially if they already have religious trauma.
That's the problem, which
Yeah.
means, like in my organization, I try my best in having many, many courses that have no association with my organization. You know, the family program. I don't care who you are, where you're from. I don't care if you pray, don't wear hijab, don't wear hijab. I don't care. You're Muslim, even if you're non-Muslim, you're welcome to come to the family program because I teach it in such an objective way. Come and learn how Islam, you might even want to convert to Islam when you realize how beautifully Islam coordinates and influences, but doesn't necessarily, um, um, subhanallah, what's the word? What's the word when someone organizes people when they're dancing and stuff? What's the word for that?
Choreographer.
Choreograph. That's what
Choreograph.
Islam doesn't do. Islam doesn't choreograph your marriage. Do you know? It doesn't literally say, as a husband, turn around to your wife and then say X, do Y. Islam has left all of that up to you. It just gave you certain had, certain boundaries, and certain spirit of the text within the boundaries, and then says, Bismillah, go love your life, go and love your wife the way you want to love your wife.
And
Go
it
love
goes
your
back
husband.
to the point you made in the very beginning of this talk that, you know, Islam gives us an option. You know, we have the free will, we have the choice, and sometimes people go astray, and sometimes people's hearts lean in. So
That's
it
it.
gives us back to the sense of true freedom.
So love bombing is a complicated statement because, again, everything I'm analyzing the best I can with my juristic tools, because I'm not a psychologist, which is that someone being very kind to you could just be very kind. And
Yeah.
I know that in a cynical world that people may not think that that is the case, but I also found that very selfish people presume ulterior motives in others. Very selfish people, I want people to listen to that statement. Very selfish people often smear others in the mud they like to swim in, so that when they can't ever assume going out of their way to sacrifice for another, they assume that when another person is doing it. However, this is what I would say to people: when people sacrifice something big for you, it's often the case that you probably shouldn't take it. Because you're shielding the other person from also thinking that or you have to be very careful as to why a person is helping you, because it is probably more often than the case that it is love bombing in an age where intentions are so people just only focus on dhahiran, what is dhahira dunya. Everything's surface level these days, especially with social media and everything else. I would suggest that people um, uh, be very careful, but not to assume bad intention. So if someone offers you the world, you can say to them, no, thank you, whilst assuming they have good intentions. Not go, oh, this person was trying to brainwash me and da 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 da. Do you see? There's a distinction there,
But
because
if that person is already, their heart is diseased, or there is trauma, or there is emptiness, they're going to completely
they're
eat
going
that
to
up.
jump into that. They're going to dive
Oh,
in
yeah.
and that's the mistake people make. And
Yeah.
you need to walk into situations knowing your own vulnerabilities, quite frankly,
Yeah.
because no one's going to do the job of knowing you. Yeah, you have to know you. Do
Mm.
you see? And when you meet someone, if they're going to, offer you everything in the world, you need to be careful, but without having su'u dhan. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Husnul dhan min husnil ibadah." This is in Adab al-Mufrad. That good opinion is from the excellence of one's religion, of religious practice, of ibadah. So we need to have good opinion. We don't necessarily assume, oh, someone's being really kind, therefore they're trying to brainwash me or whatever. What you should do is you should view that as well intended. But if it seems like it's a bit too much, it's better to actually not take that gift. Is to think, you know what? Say to the person, well, you've only known me 1 week and you're willing to lay down the earth for me. Take it easy, right? Maybe in a year you can accept when the trust increases, right? Remember, innocence and trust are not the same thing. So hopefully this is educational for our listeners. Innocence is not the same as trust. Innocence is al-aslu bara'atu dhimma. Yeah, everyone is innocent before they're proven guilty. So it's wrong to view anyone on microaggression, micro this. No, everyone is good. But the mistake Muslims make is, oh, if everyone is innocent, I can throw my life into them. No, you cannot, right?
We
You
have
need
to
to be
tread
careful.
very carefully, and we have to
Tread
be aware of
carefully.
ourselves.
And when you build trust, for example, what happens when you said no? You know, when they tried to love bomb and give you everything, what happened when you said no? If when you said no, they turn nasty and angry
Or they
and
throw
would
tantrums, or they make
tantrums
you
or
feel
whatever,
guilty.
right? Then you're going to realize, subhanallah, this was for a favor to be named later. Do you see? So, you know, in my madrasa, as early as 4 years old, we do critical thinking in the madrasa from 4 to 16 years old. And the reason why we teach critical thinking is because we want people to be able to address and assess why is what is going on happening in front of me? What's the underlying reason? And unfortunately, without that, people can just go and trust anyone and everything and fall into, and usually what happens is they kind of sulfur surf. So traumatized people sulfur surf in the sense that unfortunately they go from one traumatizing situation to another traumatizing situation to another traumatizing situation because they're not learning the lessons, or which is equally bad, they oversteer from the previous. So if you go from a bad marriage where there's a very controlling, abusive nutcase of a husband, the minute the new husband expresses any sign that be construed as that, it's viewed as, oh my God, it's just like him, and it starts pouring out. And then the more you, and then you want to rebel hard to prove to yourself he is like the other one, that they're all the same. And so what happens is people start to project, and people start to do this thing called a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is if you treat everyone with the expectation they're going to be in a certain way, they won't let you down. They will probably end up being that certain way. So I think people, when they're being love bombed, if we want to use that term, we need to be very careful in accepting things that are disproportionate to what you've earned. If you haven't earned something, why are you getting it? Yeah. Even ask.
I want us to. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. All I was gonna say is question. Question. You want to do this for me? Why?
Mhm.
Why do you want to do this for me? I'm not different from 15, 20, 100 other people who walk through the door.
But you're not
Why am
questioning
I?
it from I have low self-esteem, I'm not deserving. You're questioning it from, this is strange.
No,
Two
because
different
everyone,
places.
exactly. It's not because I'm undeserving. It's because
Yeah.
if there is a reason behind why everyone does something, there's no harm in asking why, you know?
Yeah.
And if the person says, I see great potential in you that you could do certain things or whatever, fine, that's a reason. But because um, what happens is, for example, I've known within some organizations, right, within some charities, where the girls should have some, like all the girls that raise money for charity, all the people that go to the street and ask people for charity are all certain girls of a certain age, with a certain mindset, with a certain figure even, right? And what's happening is they should just look around and
Interesting
go,
observation.
why are we all the same? Do you understand? It
Mm.
should draw in your mind. Why is there 15? Do you see? And I had to deal with this as under Al-Madad, I had to deal with abuse cases where the men were actually divvying up who they were going to go after. So they were brought them in specifically because of who they are, and they saw that they had a certain placability, that they were pliable, that they were moldable, and they brought them in, and they even discussed how they're going to share out who they're going to target for other things, right? Basically, to take advantage of them. This is disgusting. This is the problem where people need to learn that if you're sitting next to 16 other girls and you're the 17th, you usually think, why is this happening? Why isn't there a 19-year-old guy who wants to? Why have we been selected? And then when they tell you, you are amazing, you are this, you are that, you need to, and this is where, with respect, Western, some aspects of Western, I'm in front of a psychologist, so I always add 5 caveats. Some Western mental health advice is extremely dangerous because the self-esteem is not built on rationality, meaning you're amazing, you are
I
good, you are
agree with you.
deserving. And because you think you're deserving, any man or any leader says to you, you're amazing, you are going to go all the way, you can dominate, you're going, because of this inner self-reality that I'm deserving, I'm
And
everything,
emptiness.
emptiness, you're going to fill that with that delusion that you have about yourself. That gharar is now going to be exploited. So it's not to do with thinking you're the most amazing thing in the world, and it's not to do with thinking that you are asfal as-safilin. You need to say, you know what, I teach brothers and sisters in my team, some present, people in my team that you've spoken to, even today. And when they say, oh, I feel nervous if I speak or whatever, what advice do I give them? I'll tell you what advice I say. I say, when you stand in front of people, sister, say to yourself that I am a slave of Allah Azza wa Jal. I am a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He saw fit to create me. I am the daughter of my mother. I am the daughter of my father. And they love me. And I am the student of my teacher. And he thinks I'm capable. And she thinks I'm capable. You need to affirm these things about yourself. And then you will stand straight. And you're not going to give a damn who says what or whatever. Because you know your value is derived from people who are assessing based on reality, not based on jealousy, hatred. Unfortunately, people come from traumatized families, whether it's siblings or parents. The parent limits the vessel of your capacity based on the limitations on their vessel. You can never do better than me. You're always just another version of me, and most likely a lesser version than me. Whereas we should assume about our children, ala ra'si wal ayn, that they will go on our heads and our shoulders, and they will go further than us. Isn't that what we want as mothers and as fathers?
That's true. That's true.
But the cultish parent would limit their children.
Before we end our talk today, because I know we've been talking for 2 hours, I want us to reflect on the concept of religious trauma.
Yes.
And how that plays out when it comes to this kind of mindset. It could be in a family setting, it could be in a marriage setting, it could be among friends, it could be in communities, it could be in bigger organizations. So many people leave these environments carrying invisible wounds that religious trauma can include. But before they leave, before they decide to leave, how are these wounds created? So these can show up as chronic anxiety. This can be a panic around spiritual topics, that they're very sensitive about certain topics. They fear of divine punishment. They live in, Allah is going to punish me, God is going to punish me. And that is their motivation only. So there is no balance between raja and khawf. There's no balance between hope and fear. Yes. They distrust authority internally. See, all this happens internally before somebody decides to take the movement to move or to stay. Difficulty praying,
and
even
it applies to marriages as well,
communities. What is it?
I was just saying that we both agreed that applies to marriages as well.
That's very true in very toxic relationships. Difficulty entering healthy faith communities, trusting that new relationships, new people will be good for them. Identity confusion, it gets them to the point where we don't know who we are, especially if you are with a narcissist or a psychopath for such a long time. You don't know who you are. You've muted your voice. You had to agree with everything, and you allowed yourself to be in that abusive relationship for just to get the family going. And sometimes people confuse God with the abusive system or the abusive partner. And that when they are not espoused, it really affects their spirituality. So those are some of the points that I wanted to highlight and see how would you like to reflect on those.
Because I'm now, I think, going to self-impose succinctness upon myself, right? I need to be succinct. I want to send a message to everyone, right? Which is that when a group offers you a way to be and offers a way to move forward as a community, know very well that that group, and when the speaker or the leader mentions the verses of the Quran, which is a very powerful thing, psychologically, Ustada, if I mention an ayah to you, it's something that will trigger an automatic response of submissive. Oh, this is Allah said, isn't it, Ustada? Yeah. Right? Let's be honest. Whenever, it doesn't matter. I've noticed this. It doesn't matter how senior, how qualified, how rich, or how. When you mention Allah said to a Muslim, there's a very natural willingness to just give in, to say, I'm not going to mess with what Allah said. I may. If you're quoting Quran, I'm going to fall silent, because we have this internalized haiba and respect and and awe at the words of Allah Azza wa Jal. What the mistake people make is that they don't realize every single group is splicing the speculative dhanniyat understanding of man with the divine objective qati'iyat of the Quran and the Sunnah, which means that
And that's
definitely
done on purpose to create that authority figure, that control.
so this is the issue. This is the issue. So on one hand, we could talk about manhaj. People usually use the word manhaj for groups, and we talk about madhahib for salah often, and fiqh and hajj and zakat. But really, the same applies to madhahib. The madhahib are speculative, yeah, within certain fields, right? On the qati'iyat, the definitive. But what happens is a person should realize that there are, within the speculative, there are core definitive qati'iyat, or the muhkamat, right? The unambiguous, clear aspects of Islam. So no madhab is going to say, according to this particular madhab, Maghrib is 9 rak'at, nine units of prayer. Nobody's going to say that, because it's not possible to say that. So unfortunately, what happens is there haqq in the group? 100%. Is there Quran and Sunnah? 100%. But the problem is, the student, when they join, they are not taught to learn the deen independently, to be able to measure and sift, to do sabr and taqseem, to weigh and do tawazun, and to weigh and say, okay, the group is correct because of this separate thing called Islam. Right? When you're a muqallid ammi, we all know this because we all started as muqallid ammi. When we first learned to prayer, with respect, we didn't have a clue. We just followed the way the imam at the madrasa or our parents showed us, correct? You didn't know the evidences of why you do ruku or whatever. But we learned, we become muqallid muttabi', and then after muqallid muttabi', you become mujtahid. And that means you have full purview of all of the texts, correct? So even with the madhahib, you should stick to a madhab, because if you don't stick to a madhab, I don't know how you're going to pray, right? You know, because you cannot differentiate between the speculative and the non-speculative, the qat'iyat, right? Though prayer is pretty much, majority of it is qat'iyat, and there's few things that are speculative. But within groups, a group is formed based on ijtihad. And ijtihad is a scholar who has exhausted himself, his mind and his understanding of the text, to formulate a tariqah, a manhaj, a pathway for a set goal. And that means that he has an assessment of reality, which, by the way, what they call tahqiqul manat. And that assessment of reality isn't even textual. That's based on how well you understand reality. Your qualifications is eyes, ears, mouth, 5 senses, and how well those are inform a sound understanding of reality, number one, right? That's why some fuqaha, they said someone who is blind cannot give fatwa on certain things, because it would require him seeing the situation. Do you see? So certain things are to do with the reality. The second thing is understanding the core texts that if you and I, Ustad, disagree with, because they are mutawatir, they are muhkamat, we become unbelievers. Yeah? So no one's denying that. But the group, what it is a gathering of all of these things with a specific dhanni, speculative take by an individual who has a spark of imagination, an idea of how he wants to help the ummah. Unfortunately, in the group, they should be trained, in any group, they should be trained to that it's okay to leave. Right from the beginning, it's okay to leave. We actually have...
the same thing with marriages, the same thing with families, the same thing with a job.
Exactly, right? This idea, it's actually the worst kind of leader or husband who basically wants to keep his family against the will, wants to keep his wife against her will. Why do you want to keep someone who doesn't like you? Why doesn't it says deal with them ma'rufa. In the Quran it says deal with them, with goodness, right? Why do you want to? And the reason is because, this hope and fear, they want khawf murakkab. They want to basically use fear, compound fear, as the sole tool for controlling a person. So this is one of the things we need to really recognize, that when you're part of any kind of collective, marriage, group, or whatever, the idea that you have to, uh, let me get the first point out actually, which is that that group isn't divine. That marriage may not work out. It's not divinely instituted. That marriage needs to work out. It may not work out. Many of the Sahaba divorced more times in a way that will make us blush how many times they divorced. Many of the Sahabi, the Sahaba got divorced many times, many times. So the issue is that we need to look at when we're entering a group, we need to be told, number one, that it's okay to leave a group. I just have a particular slant, a particular take on how to express these clear-cut divine texts, right? Meaning some groups are top-down, more controlling. Some groups are too free. Yeah, sometimes I criticize myself. My organization is too free. Do as much as you like, when you want, how you want. It's there's where's the ta'ah, right? In my organization. But what I do is I do levels. So the amount that you're internally convinced is the amount that you need to follow certain instructions. And the amount you're more convinced, you need to follow instructions. But all the instructions must be solely within the remit of the da'wah. Solely within the remit of the da'wah, right? As opposed to it being part of your entire life and telling you how to live your whole life. Within the da'wah, an amir, the whole point of an amir is ala wazni fa'il. Alaysa dhalik? Ala wazni fa'il. Meaning someone who's constantly and continuously instructing. That's what amir means.
And learning.
Yeah, and learning, of course, right? But the word amir is continuously instructing. It's not amir, it's amir. It's an exaggerated form of the word. Because, and by the way, why is he instructing? Because he loves power? No. Because the Prophet said how bad a wetness power is for akhirah. What a poor weaning power and seeking power is on the Day of Judgment. He criticized it. He said, don't give power to the one who wants it, the one who salivates for it. And unfortunately, what happens is, if we're going to talk about marriage, a lot of young men who have never experienced responsibility, they can't even take care of a goldfish. The goldfish would die. And then what happens is they're thrusted on them. It is a power, because there is some authority they have over the wife. They don't know how to handle it. Even I've seen the most softest, gentlest passive men become violent, because they don't know how to exercise authority. They're not calm, assertive. They're not comfortable in
they're not ready. They haven't been given the opportunity. They haven't seen it. It wasn't modeled to them.
That's it. Yeah. So what they do is they kind of cosplay and imitate what they think is authority. They play out rujula that they saw on TV, what they saw out in films, what they saw on Instagram. And unfortunately, this is what causes so many problems within marriage. So first thing is, anyone who's in a group should be made to feel comfortable to leave.
Sahih.
Yeah, right. We have an entire document internally within our Quran Institute, which is the legitimacy and the validation of the one who mufaraqatul jama'ah, the one who leaves the justification for the one who leaves the jama'ah. And I go through various evidences from Quran and Sunnah to prove that. Like one of them is the man who he wanted to leave Medina. The Sahaba said, like, how dare he want to leave Muhammad, peace be upon him. Leaving Muhammad is like leaving Islam, at that time, right? But the Prophet said, leave him. لا يتحدث الناس أن محمدا يقتل أصحابه. I don't want the people ever saying that Muhammad harms his companions. You see? So even the guy was leaving, he said, I don't want people saying. And that's to do with people leaving, right? We've not got there yet. But in terms of when you're there, you should be very careful in terms of you're only subscribing to the authority because you agree with it. If you don't agree with it, they're no longer an authority of you. You're only subscribing to authority. The minute you say, well, I actually don't believe in this work, or you. So another condition in Islam is you have to agree with the vision of the group, but you also have to agree with the leader. If you don't agree with the leader, by default, you're not agreeing with the vision. So you should leave.
Same thing with husband and wife, the same thing with
That's it.
a work environment or a partnership.
Exactly. You need to go to Sharia Council and say that even though I agree with the vision of marriage, and that he has authority, he is exercising the authority in a way that transgresses my rights, and therefore I'm no longer in a marriage. He is not the provider and the protector. He's the one who actually harms me, and he doesn't provide for me. Do you see? And provision can be other things as well, like rights to intimacy. So intimacy, financial provision, protection. If those things are not met to a certain standard, you can go to Sharia Council And yes, there's a bit of paperwork. Yes, there is. It's not, yeah, and you give him talaq like that. It doesn't work like that. You'd have to go to a Sharia
It's
council.
a
But
process.
it's a process, and they will you see. But when a person has the power of talaq, which is actually very interesting, because a person who's in charge of a group, I want this message to go out for anybody who runs an Islamic organization or group. I want to tell them something from my heart, because I'm also a leader of an organization, very small organization, but nonetheless, note that that person, when they join that organization, they really love that work. Maybe they didn't know how to express it to you that they really love that work. Maybe they're not very competent. Maybe they're not as smooth talking and bringing you results, but they really love the work. And what you need to be very careful is that when you have the talaq gun, because you can just say, I don't want you in my organization, think about how vulnerable that heart is. Think about the fact that they love this work. Find a way to engage with their capability and their love somewhere. You see, but don't put them in places, because dhulm is two things in Islam. Because originally dhulm is to place something in its incorrect place. وضع الشيء في غير مكانه الصحيح. صحيح. So if you put someone in a higher position than they shouldn't be, that's a dhulm, because they're going to get stressed out, they're going to get burnt out, and they're going to suffer, and they're going to fall out with their spouses or have arguments with because the group is overworking them. And if you put them in a too lower position because you don't trust a skin color, or you don't trust women, or you don't trust oh, he's a bit like this or whatever, he has Salafi leanings or Sufi leanings or whatever. If you do that, then you're also discriminating and doing dhulm. But the point is, because you're the leader and you can say yay or nay, and you can fire and hire and fire, you have to appreciate that that person just gave their heart to that organization, just like that person gave their heart to that marriage. You can't just step on it anytime you feel like it. It's very intoxicating. The power to be able to yank away something that someone loves is a very, very powerful thing, much like the rights of men to their children as well. That to un-Islamically, without any grounds to Islam, say that you're going to deny access to there's a difference if he's a violent monster. That's different.
Or the
Just
woman, or the woman. We
the
always
woman.
assume it's the man. Yeah,
Yeah.
the woman could be a monster.
Yeah, but it's a very common thing that when the divorce, because of, again, the bigger cult, remember? I'm asking all our listeners not to forget the bigger cult, the macro cult, which is Western society. It will favor the mother in places where Islam does not favor her, and that's a matter of fact. You see? So what happens is what, though Islam favors up to a certain age that the children are with the mother over the father, and I can go into the fiqh. That's not the point I'm making. I'm saying, and I know you know the point I'm making, which is that to restrict a child from its father, right, because you have the power, in itself shows you that that is dhulm, and that is misusing authority and power that you
That's
have,
oppression.
because you're using the government law to have children not have access to their father when that person is fit to be around his children.
Very true.
So again, leaders of organizations need to know that people they're not just some pawn, they're not pawns. They gave up a large part of their life to you and what you believe in more. Because the whole point of the visionary leader is he loves, of course you love your work, you came up with it. Do you understand? Like, I know.
Same thing when a woman sacrifices leaving her parents' house or her life
Exactly.
to be with a new family, and sometimes they move across the oceans to be with the
Absolutely.
other person.
That shouldn't be trodden on. That person has separated themselves from their major support networks that they've been familiar with their entire life.
Yep.
Yeah, I heard that amongst Arab Berber culture, I don't want to offend any of the Berber tribe, but in some rural cultures, literally they're not allowed to see their mum and dad for about 2 months, right? She can cry, she can suffer.
They can bond.
Right, so that she gets used to not. So there's extremes, like my Berber Algerian friend told me as a more of a. He didn't say he wasn't recommending it. Let's just say that. But the point is we understand that when someone is under your care, there's a vulnerability that they have offered you. That's what we're saying, isn't it, Ustada? And you need to
Absolutely.
be very careful not to tread on the hearts of people who have opened themselves up to you. The way people have opened themselves is in no way the way you have, as a leader, have opened your heart. Because you're the one who, if everything goes, you're the last one who's there, right? So you need to make sure that that a person understands that the dhanni and the qati'i are not the same thing. That if you disagree, right, on Islamic grounds, but what happens is the group teaches you the Islam, so there's no way out. The husband gives you the fiqh, so there's no way out. And this is why it's so important for women also to learn the deen in places like family program, because
Yeah,
then they're equipped to make sure that ta'a mutlaqa, to translate for the listeners, is ultimate obedience is only to Allah, not to any husband, not to
that's
an
very,
emir of a group,
very
and
true.
not to even to the caliph. It's to Allah Azza wa Jalla and His Messenger. So that means that if you learn your deen, you know that, like, look at the audacity, one could argue, right? That the Sahaba went to the Prophet. Imagine how a leader like me would feel if I was some arrogant tyrant. They went up to the Prophet and said, you know that view you have, Ya Rasulullah, is that your view as a prophet or just you?
Yeah,
Ya Allah. Imagine someone saying that to their husband. Kalamt, I have spoken, you must do. Yet they were questioning the Prophet ﷺ and saying, is that your personal view? Because militarily, this strategy doesn't sound good. Yeah, I can give you a better idea. Or is this, you as a prophet, is this wahi? Because if it's wahi, sam'an wa ta'an, no problem. But if it's like your personal view as a human being that you think war strategy should be like done like this or like that, or the treaty should be written in this way, that way, then may I offer a view? So if the Prophet ﷺ was allowing people to consult him and he's getting divine revelation, no leader, no husband or mother who sometimes becomes this controlling matriarch who her children must live like they never left the womb, right? No,
that's right.
she needs to also make sure that she doesn't have godlike powers over her sons and her daughters. That there's only um, you could say ta'a muqayyada, ta'a
Yeah,
narrow leader.
blindness. Yeah.
Yes, it muayyana, very specific leadership. And within that, whenever you see someone breaking that boundary of leadership, whether it's a husband or a leader or a caliph or a school teacher or whatever, that's when you need to be on the alert that you are being groomed for something else. You shouldn't take that as a kindness. Those boundaries are not there for fun, they're there for the protection of the leader and the led.
So with that point, yeah, Mufti, we've been talking for 2.5 hours, I
Yes,
think.
yes.
May Allah
Alhamdulillah.
make it beneficial,
Ameen ya Rabbi.
and may whomever hears this, it will be a means for their healing and restoration, and hopefully turning around if they are in a path where it's not the best for them. So inshallah, we will have another episode where we talk about what happens when they leave and how can they leave
Yes.
and how can they restore their sanity and spirituality. So
Jazakumullah
I
khair.
appreciate today's session. Jazakallahu khairan.
Wa
Thank
yaki.
you so much.
We've switched roles as a host. You're
What
the
is that?
host. You're the host. I'm the guest. And
Oh yeah? No, no,
and
mashallah.
people got to recognize this is going to happen from time to time because this is a conversation, and I really
Yes,
appreciate it. Uh, Ustada Iman, I appreciate your time, and
of
I
course.
I hope that further conversations can elaborate on this in more and more detail. And the whole point is in a group, be careful about the signs where you're being given things that you don't deserve. Number
Hmm.
two, note the difference between the haqq of Islam and the particular iteration or opinion of a scholar or a leader. They're not the same thing. They are not synonymous. The fourth thing is probably if you've left any grouping, whether it's marriage or group or family that was
Friendships or
hostile,
jobs.
probably a good idea to first find yourself a little bit before you jump into another rebound and another
Beautiful.
rebound and so on. And
Very nice.
lastly, I would say that because I really do want to get into joining a cult, being maintained in a cult, and leaving a cult in more detail. But I would say that always understand the meta or the more wider cult, which is ultimately any view that is any worldview that is pushing itself on you based on untruth, in a way that you are not given the ability to think for yourself and are coerced. Therefore, the societies that we live in are quite cultish, and we need to make sure that a lot of people join Islamic groups because they've escaped the biggest cult of all, which is Western liberal secular civilization. Doesn't mean we can't be contributing Muslims and be within those societies. But last time I checked, Ustad Iman, in the West, they afford people to not have to believe every single thing that every politician believes. They afford that to non-Muslims.
Yes.
For example, in America, where you live, some people who are anarchists, some people who are Satanists, some people.
Yes.
So if you can be a Satanist and an anarchist, allow us to do some dawah. Anyway, let's leave it at that. Jazakumullahu khair. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Ma salama. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa
Wa
barakatuh.
alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.